Favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So the recommendation of the council recess the regular meeting, which has just taken place of council, with the intention of to reconvene at the conclusion of the town hall meeting regarding the 2015 budget process scheduled for Monday, 2014, September 29th. And we're going to start off now. And Mr. Cooper, do you want to give us a little bit of the background on the procedures, please?
Yes, absolutely. So what I'll do is quickly go through how an e-town hall works, and then I'll just quickly describe what the roles are, and then finally I'll discuss the approach that we typically take. So we have 1 hour dedicated to the e-town hall. At the 1 hour mark, what I will do is ask if there's an interest in extending it for an additional 30 minutes. Usually that's because there's a number of questions we haven't yet asked. As for the actual method by which the public can participate, there are a number of tools available. Twitter, of course, is the popular method, followed by Facebook. We also have a web form. You can log on to our website and ask your question that way. You can call in, or you can ask in person. And we certainly welcome those of you who have come in tonight in person to ask your questions as well. The meeting is being broadcast live on Shaw Tonight, but you can also watch it on our website. The website where you can get information as the meeting unfolds is nanaimo.ca/go/townhall. And the topic, and this is important, is the 2015 budget. So we want people to weave in the 2015 budget as they ask their questions. Now, there are a number of roles that I'll quickly point out. The first one are the point people. These are the two individuals who take the questions. The first one on the council side is Mayor Bertan, and on the city side is Ted Swaby, the city manager. Each of those point people have a team at their disposal, so obviously council is one team and city staff is the other. There is a presenter role. That is my role. My job is to read out the question and then direct it to the appropriate group who has an answer. And third, there is a moderator. That's Guillermo over here on the administrative side. And that role sorts the questions as they come in. Finally, as we move through the meeting, typically I'll flip back and forth between questions from Twitter, Facebook, all the different methods, and then every so often I'll turn to the gallery and invite members of the public to come up and ask their question. These seats across the front here, they have been reserved for individuals who are asking questions. That's how I know who's coming up next. So once you've asked your questions, if you could reseat yourself, that would be fantastic. Okay, so with all of that said, we'll jump right into this.
Okay, and Mr. Cooper, I just want to remind you, unless you pointed out and I missed it, that the questions really have to be strictly related to the 2015 budget, city budget, so as to not make it so broad and open up to so many varied questions that the meeting will be extended. It will be on from 7 o'clock until 8 o'clock tonight, 1 hour, and then if there are a number of questions that have not yet been answered, we will ask council for a motion to extend it for a maximum of 30 additional minutes, and then we're going to have to get back on with our meeting that we have fully agenda for in any event. So I would just like to quickly add too that Councillor Anderson was the one that I would like to acknowledge his efforts in the past to start these town hall meetings. And the intent really was to try to get more involvement from the community, and I think we have done that. And I think more specifically, Councillor Anderson, I thought, had a view that we needed to have more young people involved in politics, and I think this is a great way of doing it. So hats off to you for doing this. This is our third, I believe, and we did win an award through your efforts. We will give you credit for that as well because it was your idea. So, Councillor Anderson, do you want to add something now?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would mention that when I brought this idea forward, you did say if it was a success, council would take all the credit for it, and if it was a failure, it would just be my fault. So,
and that still stands.
But I did want to mention as well that through these forums, it's not just about questions. There's also comments about the budget, and I just wanted to clarify that with Mr. Cooper as well, that people are eligible and able to come to the podium just to give comments about what they think priorities should be for the budget as well.
Yeah, good point. Okay, Mr. Cooper, we're operational. We'll leave it in your good hands here.
All right. Well, here we go. So the first question is directed to Mayor and Council, and the question reads, I really like Vancouver's separate bike lanes. Is there anything for improving Nanaimo bike lanes in the budget?
Well, I think we do have some, and I'm not sure if Councillor Anderson really has, but do we have some budget information on what amount has been allocated for bike lanes? We've tried to bring in as many bike lanes as we can in areas where they're obviously easily able to be put in, and but maybe if you'd like to expand on that a little more.
Within the plan, there are a number of roads that have been identified to be have bike lanes installed on them. A couple of examples would be Boundary Road and Estevan, sort of following the Transportation Master Plan's idea of a complete street, where we'll be looking at doing a couple of roads where we would take some of the travel lanes away and replace it with some bike lanes, improve the transit facilities, as well as the pedestrian facilities. So
Can you deal with the budget allocation? The question specifically said, is there anything for improving the Nanaimo bike lanes in the budget? So is there any dollar cost that we've established?
I think within the upcoming budget, it's around $400,000 a year, which has been put into the budget, which obviously will be dependent on council approving all the plans that are in there. So that would be in addition to, a lot of times as well, we'll do bicycle facilities in opportunity with other projects as well. So when we have some road rehab projects, let's say, then the bike lanes would also be done at the same time. So we would establish bike lanes as a number of different ways, but as far as specific money that's been put in there, it's about $400,000 that has been put in.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper, back to you.
All right. This next question focuses on the RCMP. Why are you planning to hire 20 or more new RCMP staff over the next 4 years, despite the fact that crime rates have been consistently dropping? And that's directed to Mayor and Council.
Okay. Well, I think for my part, and others on council might have a view as well, we don't automatically hire them. This is what the projections from the RCMP. The RCMP gives us a wish list, if you want, of what they would like to see in the way of enforcement facilities and personnel. And it's not inexpensive. And I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, they came with a request for 25 additional officers. We were able to accommodate financially 5 at that point, and then we phased them in so many a year after that. So I think at this point, we're dealing here with a projection of what we would like to see in a perfect year over the 4-year period, but that's going to be entirely contingent upon having the funds available to pay for it. It's not going to be an automatic hire of 20 people. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to comment that we adjudicate on an annual basis as it relates to higher service levels, one of which would be RCMP, and it's done on an annual basis, and it's not a given that we will be hiring 20 more or 5 more or 1 more for 2015.
Councillor Paggi.
I would just like to add to your comments, Your Worship, that the RCMP have impressed upon us over a number of years that the preventative work that they do has to be really ongoing, and it is one of the reasons that that crime rate is down, not only in this municipality, but in others as well, of course. So prevention, of course, I'm sure doesn't need 20 over 4 years, but it's a very important component of it.
I might just ask, for staff, does Mr. Clements have a comment or no? I'm not trying to entice him to answer, but...
Thank you, Your Worship. At the 2014 Budget Deliberations, Council looked at this issue, and one of the things they did was actually push the hires further off into the future and delay them into future. And I think that at that time they invited the new OIC to come back and make a presentation on staffing levels and what their requirements were. And I think that that's something that we'll be considering with Council at the time we go through the budget discussions.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson will give you the final one here.
Thank you, Your Worship. My point has been made clear by yourself, but I was just wanting to point out to the Mr. Lance or Mr. Smith, who put forward the question, that our crime rates are dropping in some areas, but they're increasing in others. As we had our last presentation, youth crime is dropping, but vehicle thefts are up. So I think it's important that we keep with the growing population and increase the staff as required.
Yeah, well, the point is, I think that if we start taking resources away, we're not going to be able to maintain the same stats, I wouldn't think. Mr. Cooper.
All right, I'll take a question from the public. If one of the members like to come forward.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Just a couple, well, not a couple. One question, and I understand I've got to narrow it down to the 2015 period, but I believe on the presentation that was made on September the 8th, it was represented that the tax increase we were likely looking for 2015, I believe, was 2.2%. However, it's notable that that doesn't include anything possibly for colliery, dams, whatever that solution is going to be. Could be 3 million, 8 million, whatever that might be. Port Theatre, 6.5 million. I think that there's still something in the wind for maybe the Nanaimo Recycling Exchange looking for another 3 million. If those three things actually did come in and come on stream next year, that would be another 19.5% increase in what our taxes would be for next year. So do you think it would be better to represent that as a little more realistic number rather than 2.2%? I think that's a question.
When I think, as you well know, when council gets into deliberating on the 2015, that'll be the council of the day following the election in the middle of November, because obviously we're not going to be spending a lot of time on the 2015 budget, this council. And at that point, they're going to be looking at all the aspects of it, and I can't tell you until they get into it and determine what it'll be, but the figures that you quoted and the issues that you raised undoubtedly will be looked at very closely.
Okay, thank you.
Just a whole bunch of, before you go, we've got Councillor Bestwick, Councillor Kipp, Councillor Paggi, Councillor Bestwick, go ahead.
Thank you. I stand to be corrected, but I think we work off a 5-year financial plan.
Couldn't hear you.
Sorry, Jim, or Mr. Taylor. We operate off a 5-year financial plan, and clearly once the new council and mayor are elected, I'm certain that there will be an opportunity to discuss specifically those three items that you spoke to, the colliery, the NRE, and the Port Theatre. The $6.5 million that you make reference to, I think it's 4.6 in the event that the Port Theatre raises the 8 million. The NRE was a request that was not approved to the best of my interest, and the colliery dams is still up for discussion based on we're still waiting for the information. Do we think it's going to be somewhere between 3 and 10? Time will tell.
Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Councillor Bestwick said. Each of those is added over a number of years. So, but the 19% is scary. The sign of the times tells you pretty much we're looking for trying to keep taxes to the least we can. You'll hear tonight a lot of asks for spending, or you'll hear a lot tonight asks not to spend. And I think that's part of what this session is about tonight, so council can hear from the public and hear that those type of figures are coming forward. That doesn't count the RDN budget that we deal with, nor does it count all the water increases or the garbage increases either. So it is, to me, and I think my peers here, it is a concern that this is going up really fast.
Councillor Paggi.
Thank you, Worship. It is my understanding that with regards to the Port Theatre expansion funds, that actually would not show up until 2016. Now, as far as the 4.6 and as far as Councillor Bestwick explained, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that the 4.6 that the city committed itself to is hopefully being reduced by granting from the Build Canada Fund and also funding from the Sesquicentennial Fund. That's the fund on the occasion of the 150th birthday of Canada. As far as the 2 million that you've added onto the 4.6, the loan guarantee, I'm also of the understanding that the Port Theatre Society, by virtue of having collected $1 a ticket for quite some time, are already in a position themselves to leverage about $1 million. I think Mr. Halliday said it on September the 8th. So while 6.6 is the number you use, I'm pretty confident it will be a lot less.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Cooper.
Okay, the next question reads, if the provincial government is successful in having BC Ferries absorb a portion of the gas tax, how will that affect the city with loss of money for city projects?
Mr. Swaby, we have it here for you. This is a question directed to city staff. I'm not sure if Mr. Cooper mentioned that, so we'll be looking forward with great anticipation to your response.
Currently, the gas tax money is allocated to various projects that we have, so council's decision to reallocate that money would have implications for where we're currently spending it. So there's no doubt that it would have an impact if we were to reallocate it to ferries, and that would be a decision for council in the future. We currently allocate most of it towards the water treatment plant.
Okay. Next item.
All right, the next question is directed to Mayor and Council, and the question reads, how can you justify that Nanaimo firefighters make the same wage as Vancouver firefighters when the cost of living in Nanaimo is so much less than in Vancouver?
Well, this just peripherally engages what we're really trying to do is talk about the 2015 budget, and I understand that it obviously will have implications for that. But I think the reality is that the firefighters actually negotiate basically on a monthly, on a provincial basis, and IAFF are now through some of the procedures now, and they're going through discussions on it, but it's not done community by community, but rather provincially wide. But I think the expert here would be Councillor Greaves. Councillor Greaves, you're on.
Thank you, Worship. I don't know about an expert, but I have dealt with this quite a bit. Basically, firefighters throughout the province do the same job, similar to nurses, teachers, and therefore they get the same pay. They get paid based on skills, knowledge, abilities, and tenure, and not where they live. We have Nanaimo firefighters living in Victoria, Parksville, East Wellington, so they don't all live in Nanaimo. We also have Vancouver firefighters that live outside of Vancouver, and I think we're talking about Vancouver proper, although you maybe consider Surrey, Delta, and so on. But a lot of the firefighters in Vancouver don't live in Vancouver. They live in Abbotsford and elsewhere. So it really has nothing to do with where you live. And when the city decides on fighting this, which they have many times, they don't think that the firefighters should get the same wages as Vancouver, and they go to binding arbitration, which is what they have to do because firefighters cannot strike, so they have to go to arbitration. The arbitrators recognize that it's the same job with the same skills, knowledge, abilities, and skill set. So it's almost a waste of time to go to arbitration because arbitrators normally, in my brief career with the firefighters, they usually do get the same, if not always get the same wages as Vancouver firefighters.
Okay, thank you. Back to you.
All right, we'll take a question from the gallery next.
Is that?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. My name is Randy O'Donnell. My question is in regard to the growing size of civic government. I've been in the area now for 21 years and have watched things closely over that time. And I've noted the number of employees per thousand population has been growing disproportionately to that population growth. Nanaimo is also a city in which the population is aging. Most of the people that are moving here and growing our population tend to be seniors and people who are on fixed incomes. Where my concern comes in is the biggest cost to local government is salaries, benefits, and pensions. And as the size of civic government grows, so do those burdens on the taxpayers. Now, the number of salaried employees that are earning more than $75,000 in the city of Nanaimo has exceeded the growth in population by about 2.5 times. In other words, the size and scope of government is outpacing the population growth. Because of that, the city becomes less attractive to business, it becomes less attractive to industry, and it certainly becomes less attractive to young families. And a consequence of that is we have now seen house prices fall for the last 3 years. So my question to you would be, how will you reduce spending to try and have a 0% tax increase for fiscal year 2015? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would be hesitant to say that real estate prices have been falling for 3 years. I think the market is gaining some ground now. It may have fallen in the past. But I don't know if Mr. Clements or Mr. Swavey could talk about some of the comparisons we've done as far as salaries goes for communities of our size. And I don't know if that information is readily available. But it's my understanding that we, as a council and staff, regularly look at comparisons provincially, and I think we're in the middle, roughly, of the cost of it. And I'm not trying to justify that that's a good enough reason for not. And I really do think that this council has made every effort to try to look at mitigating costs wherever we can. But Councillor Bestwick has a point he wants to raise. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Very good question, of course, and it's always a very topical question heading into November's every 3 years, soon to be every 4 years. I would suggest strongly that performance evaluation as it relates to core services review is something that will identify potentially some areas that may be within the $195 to $200 million annual operating budget that the city operates under. We might be able to shift monies inside there in order to get better bang for our buck, so to speak, so that we can keep taxes at a moderate pace versus the pace that we've been on. But it's certainly it has to be a commitment and a will of the mayor and council to perform such an undertaking.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate your response, Mr. Bestwick, but it's my understanding that this current council has resisted any opportunity to have a programs review, a core review.
Well, you're correct. We have done we undertook an internal review of contracted services, which is in the multi-millions of dollars that the city expends on an annual basis. That's one place. But you're absolutely correct that this current council has rejected the opportunity or to do such an undertaking, and I think that it's time and appropriate that it take place.
Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. They're always good. As far as growing civic government, there's been some reports recently that talk about that, Ernst Young report. But we have looked at parts of core review, and of course, council has chose the last 2 terms not to do a core review. We've looked at some zero-based budgeting, or how we've tried. This last year, we went through 18 to 20 meetings of going over what each department does, what they perform, who performs with how many people, looked at the organizational structure. We had a internal organizational structure review by the previous administration, and we created a strategic plan to try and help direct some of the community wants and what the community needs. So looking at that core review, it's what we looked at is something different, identifying what is our foundation work, what our community wants, water, those type of things, the real core things. What is mandatory? What does the provincial government and federal governments demand of us? They, in fact, demand economic development, and that we fund that we put money into economic development under mandatory services. Then what is discretionary? So give us as much as you can on lists, get as many people involved to give us a list of what they think. And then we have to base it on strategies. And I think that's what's probably been one of our problems over the last year, looking at the core review, looking at zero-based budgeting, organization reviews, and a strategic plan from one of the first ones. And I think you've said before, we've got a lot of plans. We keep looking for more plans and studies, but we actually have to do something now.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your question as well. And I think at the end of the day, it's a question that our community has to answer about service levels and our budget as well, because you can't just go and cut, let's say, a water park, for example, $100,000 from it and expect that you're going to see ongoing reductions in costs. Also, when it comes to services as well, this council chose not to go to Vancouver in regards to our 911 services. So that's another cost that continues to go on as well. So it's really a question and a value question amongst the council of the day and the community about what services they value and what they're willing to potentially cut. And also we did talk about a core services review, which failed on a 5-4 vote, and council didn't choose to go down that route as well. So it's important that members of the community come and let council know about what priorities they think are important, and then council at the end of the day will make a decision based on its own values.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Well, Mr. O'Donnell, hope springs eternal. I'm one of those councillors who has not been in favour of a core review over the 2 times that we have tried that. And the reason was mainly that I felt that we had a number of internal reviews, mini reviews, if whatever you want to call them. And I'm certainly not interested in going through a program and services review that would duplicate some of the stuff that we have done already. So I'm still of that opinion. But I'm hearing what people are saying. So when the new council is in place, and if I'm still on it, I will certainly reconsider and see if there is more value now in doing that than I thought there was 2 years ago. There's one thing that I will not give up on, and I may as well tell you right now, which is the 1% asset management that we will that we've agreed to a long time ago to charge. There are things coming our way, or the city's way, within the next 8 to 10 years that really make it imperative that we do put money aside for infrastructure replacement, and I'm really serious about that, and that is not something that I would want to toy with. The other thing I want to just comment on with regards to zero-based budgeting, in some of the conferences that I have been privileged to go to over the last almost 6 years, I have talked to colleagues from other municipalities who have practiced zero-based for some time. And not all of them, surely, but certainly there are a number who kind of regretted it in the way that they felt really restrained, and they're having a really difficult time catching up now. Nanaimo financially is in good shape. I don't think anybody can argue with that, but that's not to say that we could not have a review of some sort, and I'm certainly willing to look at it.
Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. That's a very, very good questions, and/or question, the 0% question. If I'm not mistaken, we take in about $90 million, give or take, in property tax out of our $195 million. Do I get a shake of the head? Yeah, thank you, Mr. Clevens. So about $900,000 is 1% property tax increase. And as Councillor Padgey said, unanimously, all of us voted for the 1% asset management for the next 5 years. So there goes the 0% right there. And this is much needed, this 1% for asset management. If we didn't do that, if we went for a 0%, which would be wonderful for us, and we all get voted back in, and this would be a wonderful day for us. But 2 or 3 years down the road, it's going to catch up to us. And then all of a sudden, we're going to have a 6 or 7 or 8% property tax increase. So rather than do that, most of us would agree that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4% is much better than 0, 0, 0, and then 10, 12, whatever the percentage might be, because we have, as the other speaker said, we have the Colliery Dam to pay for. We have a fire station to pay for. In the future, we have police officers to hire. So we have a lot of big expenditures coming up, and I don't know how, if everything stays the same, how you would stay at 0% property tax increase. Thanks.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Mr. Cooper.
All right, I'll take another question from the gallery, if I can. There we go.
Evening, Council and Mayor. I'm Barbara Grubb, and I work at Origin at Longwood. And we, over the summer, have been working with the city to request a push light at our new crosswalk that is between our building and the Canadian Tire. I have a couple of residents with me here tonight, and they have done surveys, sat and counted cars. We've worked with the city, who have done some painting of the sidewalks for us and made yellow lines and things like that. So we do understand that our push button is in the 2015 budget, and we just wanted to bring it to your attention that this is very important to our community, also the Longwood condos behind us and the people that actually use that. We are a community of 170 people, as well as we carry 90 staff who come and go at all hours of the night using that crosswalk.
Well, I know it is, I don't know if we have a timeline on it, but I know it's in the 2015, I guess, the forecast, and I hope that, does anyone, who's going to be able to do that? Mr. Hickey, can you give us an overview on? Okay, so it's planned for 2015, and it's needed. There's no question, and we'll do all we can to make it happen. Did you have something you wanted to briefly add?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I was happy to meet with you just a few weeks ago regarding this project, and it's good that staff was able to find a way to move it from the 2016 into the 2015 budget. But at the end of the day, when we go to vote on this budget, it's up to council as a whole to decide whether or not it's an important project. And through our transportation master plan, one of the things that we talked about was making sure that our roads and our sidewalks and so on were safe for all people of all ages. And so I can tell you I'll be happy to support it when it comes in 2015, and I hope that my colleagues as well. Oops, did I just say something?
Yeah, well, we've already said it's scheduled.
I would be happy to. I hope that the rest of my colleagues support it in 2015 as well.
This is what promises or the budget?
Anyway, thanks for your question.
Thank you.
It's scheduled, so there's no reason to think it won't happen then.
Thank you.
Go ahead. What do you want to talk about?
I was on it. I just
We're
wanted
just
to
trying to do one for each response.
one person only gets to talk?
No, but go ahead.
I'm just extremely
you responded
encouraged
to
to
that
learn
earlier.
that we've moved an item from 2016 to 2015, and it's a very good item. I'm delighted to learn that.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper, go ahead.
All right. I'm going to return to the questions coming in online. Now, this question isn't entirely related to the budget. It's a bit of a stretch, but I will ask it. And the question
it's to staff, then I assume.
Well, it's really not to anyone, but either side could probably have a go at answering it. The question asks, council and staff, effectively, what is being done to encourage more voting amongst the youth for the upcoming election?
That's a good question. I know that for my part at least, part of the reason that we have holding a town hall meeting like the one tonight is hopefully to encourage all people to get involved with social media if they're uncomfortable coming down or unable to. But I think the young people in particular was the target, and I think that's what Councillor Anderson had as a view when we first brought this program forward. So we also have a task force that was originally the Mayor's task force, and now there'll be an announcement later on that Councillor Anderson will be involved in the Youth Council as well. And so we're trying to we recognize that there's a shortcoming. We recognize more young people need to be involved, and I think as a council we're trying to do as much as we can. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you. That was the point I was going to make, Your Worship, that we have struck a youth council that is working very hard, and I guess met today again. So that's excellent. And amongst the candidates, there were some extremely talented and interested people in the way our city functions. So I think there is an interest there, and I'm glad it's improving.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Well, Mr. O'Donnell, I can tell you that it's certainly not for lack of trying. The city of Nanaimo has 8,000 friends, quote unquote, on Facebook. And we have a lot of people following us on Twitter. So where are the young people with all these gadgets? We're trying to reach out to them. So anybody that's watching, get with it. We are really trying our best to get youth involved in more than one way. And one would think that the social media efforts that we have done would have shown a much better result than we see tonight.
It's a work in progress.
All right, we're going to return to the gallery. Can I have the next speaker?
Robert Fuller, 3350 Hammond Bay Road. Well, I understand some of the reasoning why some may reject a 0% budget. There are other ways to ensure we are getting good value for our tax dollars. What are the total anticipated costs for the Vancouver Island Convention Center for 2015? And that would go to staff, I presume. And are there any plans to diminish this burden to the citizens of Nanaimo other than relying on a hotel? And I'll pose that to council. Thank you.
Okay, does staff have the figures on the projections? Ms. Samborski?
Through your worship, we actually don't have the 2015 budget at this point, but it'll be fairly close probably to the 2014. So the 2014 subsidy for the Vancouver Island Conference Centre was $985,000. So it'll roughly be in that same ballpark.
Does that include the debt that we're paying as well?
No. Mr. Clements?
No, Your Worship, it does not include the debt. The debt would be in addition to that, and we'll get that number for you in just a second. Although it's always important when we remember we're talking about the debt on the conference center, it's actually not just on the conference center. We borrowed money to build this entire facility, which includes the parking facility below us, the commercial space that we've built and sold, and the remainder of the Vancouver Island Conference Center. And the annual debt payments are about $2.3 million.
Okay, did you have something?
And the question...
Oh. Other question? I just wanted to comment that we're about 3.5 a year, $3.5 million, including debt retirement. That's a pretty good average of what we've spent.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. I don't know what would happen to the conference center if we did not get the hotel that we think we are that close to. I can tell you that there will come a point, if it does not improve, that we will have to start thinking very seriously about repurposing the building. And that's not next year or the year after, I don't think, but it has to be considered. And the numbers within the next year or so, or if there's no hotel, that's high on my mind.
Well, it seems like we're waiting an awful long time for something to take rather than a little bit of forward thinking. This place is rather empty most of the time.
You're correct. In the time that I've been on council, this hotel that we are pretty confident of will appear is the fourth effort. And so that's not been for a lack of trying either. But, the beauty of this particular proposal is the fact that they are almost bringing their own clientele with them. And I know, the 75,000 tourists that have been promised to come through this hotel, even with half of that, I would be happy. But they need to have a fair chance. And I really believe that we are close. But if it for one reason or another should not happen, we're going to have to think quite differently about this building. Yes.
Okay, Councillor Kitt.
Thank you very much. I think the building in its infancy back 20 years ago by Councillor Doug Rispin was probably a good idea. It took a long time to build it, and now it's fallen off the wayside. The business plan is not working. We have to look at repurposing. I think the subsidy's around 900-something thousand, but I believe the mortgage puts us up to around the 5 million mark, so some 4 million, I think, or 3.6 might be the operational costs and the mortgage and handling costs, and then the other million. So I think we're pushing around 5 a year. And
So
I think we have to look at repurposing eventually some of it.
It just seems with all the user groups that are clamoring for space, and you could certainly approach Vancouver Island University to have a campus downtown. At least that would put people in the building and people in the downtown area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Cooper.
All right, another question from the gallery.
Hi there, Matthew O'Donnell. The question that I have, it's a common belief among the city that city councillors are, well, overpaid. Sorry, Councillor Patchy, it's true. But anyway, seriously though, it is, a lot of people believe that. So, as with every budget, people start wondering about wage increases, not really so much amongst the city, but amongst the city councillors. So I'm curious to know what council and this mayor here have to say about any potential wage increases amongst yourselves in the next term.
Well, I think for our part, for my part at least anyway, we're going to have to wait until November 15th, and then you'll be able to pose the question to the mayor and council of the day, But I think we have tried as a council to be respective of the needs for holding back costs, and I think our increases have been consistent with other communities. But that's I'll allow others to share their view. Councillor Kipp.
Well, Matthew, thanks. I mean, from my perspective, having served here for 6 years and done a term a long time ago, I don't make enough money at this job for the work I put in. When I have to know the OCP and work on it, when I have to know bylaw 4500, when I have to understand the regional district concepts, I have to understand our environment, our finances, our social structures, to trying to input on homeless issues when people hate you, religious issues, and whatever you have to put up with in it. From my perspective, when I watch friends like Larry McNabb and Lloyd Sherry and other councillors have served for decades, and you really walk out of it with a few bruises, not much financial gain, less than I think what the average mean is in Nanaimo. And from my perspective, there's no pensionable income with it, but I've always been self-employed, so I make my own money, so I understand that part too. I have a heck of a time understanding someone doing a full-time job and doing this. Doing a going to school is tough. And so to get a broad spectrum of people in here, I guess financial reward would help, but I don't know if I'm overpaid. Not my view.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Kipp and I didn't rehearse the answer to this question, but I can assure you that those that preceded all of us sitting here at this table and those that will follow us after we leave and depart will not be compensated to the place where I believe that members of council should be compensated. The amount of time, energy, resource, education that's required to put into this position to do the best job that you can possibly do as an individual is very challenging. And regardless of whether or not we meet everybody's expectations or needs all the time, I do think that the $248,000 or whatever the amount is that the 8 councillors up here receive divided by 8 is not an onerous amount for the amount of work that all 8 collectively do. And so I think that it's something that I would like to see that number increase so that people that are professionals that could say, you know what, I could commit 100% of my life to this position for 4 years because I can afford to do it and make that commitment. But unfortunately, it doesn't put people in that position professionally, so therefore, sometimes you get us.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Well, Matthew, I worked 36 years of my life for one company, and I get a decent pension. I'm not in it for the money. I can tell you that when I add up the time that I spent on council business, it's about 30 hours a week, 28, 30 hours a week. So that is 80% of a full-time job. And if I added on the time that I spent during sleepless nights, it'd be double. You'd owe me a lot of money. I think we're doing okay.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, most has been said, Matthew, but
absolutely,
you understand, and we've heard that people want younger people on council. There's a nice to have a variety, but you yourself have expressed interest in the past about politics. You're here to a lot of our meetings. We'd like to see a lot more young faces, but if you have to carry out a full-time job and put food on a table for children, a family, it's pretty difficult to do it unless you're paid a fair wage. And we are now at the middle range for all communities of like size. So, and I think that's where we'll be and continue to be in the future. So,
okay, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. You know, Matthew, there was a time when politicians got paid an absolute pittance, and what that resulted in was only people of means who could sit on city councils or in Parliament. You had to be someone who was very well-to-do in order to do that. So there has been a movement to increase the pay of politicians so that everyone would have an opportunity to participate in governing their communities. I'm just going to read you the list of committees that I have to attend. So I come to council meetings, I come to committee of the whole meetings. And then I chair the Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability. I'm a member of the Social Planning Advisory Committee. I'm a member of Safer Nanaimo Advisory Committee. I'm a member of the Protocol Working Agreement with this Nanaimo. I co-chair the Nanaimo Community Heritage and Culture Committee. And I'm on the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board. I also am deputy chair at the regional district, and I chair the Transit Committee. I chair the Regional Parks and Trails Committee, and I sit on the Sustainability Select Committee, and I sit on the Executive Committee. I would suggest to you that that's full-time employment, and I don't get paid full-time wages. Now, it's not to say that I didn't know that. It's not to say that I don't really enjoy this work, but I want you to know that it would be very difficult to do this, to do all of that, and carry a full-time job in order to put food on the table. I certainly would not have been able to do it when I was raising a family. So I'm not sure that those people who think that we're overpaid have got that right.
Okay. That's the list. Thank you very much.
Just if I may, just because, you know, some excellent points, and, you know, it's hard to disagree with any of those points. But I was speaking to someone earlier on today, and this is a town hall meeting. An older lady I spoke to this afternoon brought up just a really good suggestion that just kind of made me think. And maybe I could just give it to this council, just maybe some food for thought. I mean, your yearly salary is definitely higher than the average Canadian, certainly the average citizen of Nanaimo. Not by much, but it is. Yes, it definitely is. So maybe you could consider maybe setting a wage cap of what the average person in Nanaimo makes, and maybe that could be the wage for a city council. Because I love what you said there, Councillor Brennan, about, you know, back in the day, you know, people got it for the love of their community. And I really don't think that if you're working for a private corporation, absolutely. I mean, you should make your money, you earn it, and you should have it. But when you're in public service, especially at a local municipal level, I really think that it should be about the love of community. Not to say obviously everyone here loves their community, but when there's people, you know, all over the city who are making much less, also working full-time hours, so very struggling, sometimes working 2 or 3 part-time jobs to make that full-time wage, maybe you'd send a good message. But thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper, how are we for time?
We've got 5 minutes remaining. There are 2 members still in the gallery and 1 question here on Twitter that I'll ask
Okay,
first.
so we're close on.
I believe so, yes. So the next question reads, what aspects of the plan, that would be the financial plan, will help build long-term sustainable infrastructure?
Councillor Patchy.
Asset management, without a doubt. You know, if we had not committed some years ago to the 5 years of 1% cumulative in order to get some money in the bank to deal with things that are aging and crumbling. You know, many attempts have been made at the FCM level, that's the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, similarly at the Union of BC Municipalities, to try and get some, what I think is well-deserved help from senior levels of government as far as aging infrastructure is concerned. It's just not forthcoming. And when it does come, it's in a very limited way. So we as a municipality, I think, are on the right track with that particular aspect of the budgeting process to at least have a modicum of sustainability where it comes to the infrastructure that surely needs to be replaced sooner rather than later.
Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. Obviously, the infrastructure planning, not only the maintenance of it, but the design and hardening. With global warming coming, we have to change how we purchase, what we purchase, how we put things in the ground for our infrastructure. It goes back then again to the needs of the community. We've gone away from looking at some of our oceans and lakes and things because we can only swim so many years or so many months of the year. So we start to build big assets so that we can have that type of recreation all year round. We might have to rethink some of those, especially if they're considered to be more than just our foundational needs. But I think we have to harden our infrastructure, look at the new dynamics of rainfall, wind, storm, and those things, and make sure we're protected for that. So looking at longer life cycles. And we are not putting enough money aside in our plan currently, in my belief, to meet our needs. If we have a fairly large disaster, we'll maybe be able to pick up a lot of new things then, but currently I think we're falling behind at 1%. We need almost more in the budget. That means we would have to get rid of something else.
You know, I might just quickly add, and I think Councillor Anderson has a comment as well, that, you know, whenever we go to FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, or UBCM, which we were just last week at in Whistler, the complaints and concerns from communities across Canada, and certainly through British Columbia, is that we need more federal and provincial funding. There's been so much downloading that we're having difficulty looking after our own infrastructure financially. And when you look at the fact that out of every tax dollar, 8 cents is left with the municipality, and 92 cents are clawed back by the feds in the province. And we're saying infrastructure is a huge, huge component when you realize that our income comes entirely from taxation and a little bit of DCC's, development cost charges. So we need more help from the federal and provincial governments on helping us and all other communities fund the ever-growing costs of infrastructure. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just say that most people identify themselves as living in cities. They don't, when you ask someone, where are you from, they don't say, oh, well, I live in Canada. They say, I live in Nanaimo. They say, I live in Vancouver. And so I think this council's done a really good job in making sure that we are planning for long-term sustainable infrastructure by having our 1% for asset management. Because if you look across Canada and across the world, you actually see bridges falling down, you see sewer mains bursting in the middle of the roads, and so this council has said that we are dedicated to making sure that infrastructure is sound, and I would agree with Councillor Kipp that we do need to do more, but this is a starting place, and I think that we're headed in the right direction to making sure that there is some intergenerational equity when it comes to taxation as well.
Okay, it's back to you.
All right. Before I move back to the gallery, maybe just one last question coming in from Twitter. It is somewhat related to the last question, and it asks, how does the long-term financial plan deal with unexpected situations such as high snowfall?
Well, snowfall in particular, we have a fund set up. Snow removal budget is established each year. And if it can be augmented from time to time. But maybe Mr. Clements would probably be able to give us a very technical response on that.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The general answer to the question about how you deal with unexpected occurrences is through the establishment of reserves. And the city has a fairly well-established set of reserves, some of which are for, as we've discussed before, continuing projects, but some are specifically for contingencies. And in this specific example, we have $400,000 in a reserve for snowfall. So if we do have a high snowfall year, that does help smooth out the costs. Now, that's not an awful lot if we have a huge year, but it does help smooth out the blips in the budget.
Okay. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Mike Horn, and I'd like to ask about the manner in which that we fund park maintenance and park improvements, because looking across Nanaimo, I'm starting to see a certain unevenness in that some parks get much more attention and other parks seem to get neglected for years. In my own neighborhood, there is Barsby Park, right at the bottom of the mill stream, which is very environmentally sensitive, yet constantly has a problem with garbage and has no garbage can. More recently, I was looking at Georgia Park and realized that the plan for Georgia Park is to wait for development funds to come in and then to make massive improvements to the park. At the moment, the walkways are cracked, there's a pothole beneath one of the benches, and despite the intention to spruce up Georgia Park and make it a showcase, because I believe that is the intention of the Hilton Hotel plan, nothing's been done to improve Georgia Park during the course of this debate. I would think that from a public relations point of view, we should be paying it a bit more attention, and something similar with Colway Dam Park. So my question is, are park improvements and park maintenance funds overly dependent on development money coming in? And is there a mechanism in the budget to even out or make sure that funds don't go to the most popular parks and leave some parks in areas without new development underfunded?
Okay. Well, I think Mr. Harding might be the best. He's in charge of parks, and go ahead with a response on that.
Right. As we grow and get more and more parks, it is a challenge to keep everything up to a certain standard. So what we've worked on with council and with our Parks Commission is looking at standards of parks. So Pacific Parks will have a certain standard to them, and we'll try and maintain it to those standards. Particularly for trails, we'll have a specific standards for be it a soft surface trail or a hard surface trail. And you're absolutely right, there's some we need to get back to as we work through our pavement rehab program for our trails. We've got a lot to work on, particularly the Parkway Trail, which is over 21 kilometers. We know we have a lot of work in there to do. There's only so much funds with it, so we'll put some funds along with that. As the more popular parks, though, do have a lot more wear and tear, so they do get more attention as there's more people going through them. A lot of what we're trying to do is when we do build, either through a developer or through our own, is we build to a certain standard, a higher standard now, so that maintenance, longer term maintenance isn't as much of an issue. If that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add that Georgia Park is listed on the website as wheelchair accessible, and that may be an issue with the maintenance of the walkways.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Cooper, I think we're getting close. Is there?
Yeah, we're past the 1 hour mark. There are still 3 questions remaining on the feed. We also have, is it 2 members, I believe, in the gallery? So,
well, let's. Bayburn, did you have something?
I would like to suggest that we stay on this and deal with the people who are in the gallery right now and the 3 questions.
Yeah, and I don't think we can accept any more, or we're going to have problems with trying to finish it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gord Fuller, 604 Nickel Street. I was interested in Councillor Kip's comment that the convention centre is costing us $5 million a year with the mortgage. Does that $5 million include the $2.3 million in servicing?
That's what my thought was.
Sure, maybe I can clarify the cost because I have the budget in front of me right now. So the planned subsidy for 2014 was $1 million. That's the operating subsidy. There was another $100,000 that we have in the budget to do some capital replacement, and about $2.3 million would be the total cost associated with the debt. So if you add that all up, you're at around the $3.5 million mark. There is additional entry in our budget, but that's amortization, which is basically depreciation. It's not really an annual out-of-pocket cost.
Okay, so that's probably around 1.75% of the budget is spent on this one building alone. The question I really have is how much debt are we servicing, and what percent of the budget does this servicing account for?
Your Worship, that was a question that was part of the presentation we made to set up this meeting 2 weeks ago, and I'm flipping through my here to see if I can find it. There we go. So in 2013, our debt servicing costs were roughly just over 2% of the city's budget. Our outstanding debt at December 31st, 2013 was $53.5 million. And our actual debt servicing cost in total was about $3.1 million for the city.
Thanks.
Now, Mr. Guillermo, do we need, Mr. Ferrero, rather, Guillermo Ferrero, do we need a motion at this point now to continue on? Because it's between 7 and 8, but we can go up as long as 8:30 without a motion?
That's correct, Your Worship. I mean, we're in a recess, so you're welcome to take more questions.
Okay, good, thank you.
My name is Fred Taylor, and listening to Councillor Reeves' argument about raising our taxes every year, etc., I would like to say that I believe with staff direction and help and council's decision, you decide where to spend our money, what reserve accounts to put it into, etc. At the end of the year, you might come over with $3 or $4 million due to their expertise. And you dump it, add it to certain reserve accounts, etc., that you've already decided the amount to put in there. Give it back to us. That could end up with 3 or 4% decrease in taxes, not 1% or whatever more. If there's 900,000 equal to 1% and there's 4 million left over, what does that do next year if we get it back? Give us this minus amount because you've already decided how much money to put in those reserve accounts, etc. And you add to it with the money that's left over. And I think that's wrong.
Okay, Councillor Pachi.
To Mr. Taylor and then a question to Mr. Clements. You know, Mr. Taylor, municipalities cannot budget for deficits, so there is a certain amount of uncertainty about what you actually are getting, and it is subject to different circumstances that can change overnight. I'll let Mr. Clements explain to you,
If I may
and maybe
interrupt.
use an example or two.
If I may interrupt.
Yeah.
With their expertise, in my opinion, etc., and wise decisions, you've ended up with several million, for 3 or 4 million every year for quite often. So that proves that you're not running a deficit. You've got money left over. Hooray. Give it back.
Why don't we ask Mr. Clements
Yeah.
how we can be surprised now and then?
Clement,
by
maybe you
how
don't,
things
is there a comment you have or not? It's your discretion.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually take issue with Mr. Taylor's assertion that we know exactly where the money's coming from and what reserve it's going to be in at the end of the year. We do tend to have surpluses every year, yes, and we've talked about that many times about why that happens. It often relates to unfilled staff positions, projects they weren't able to finish, those kinds of things. We tend to put the money into reserves that are very flexible, like the General Capital Reserve, where council can reallocate that to other purposes. If we did not have this money, if we didn't have surpluses from time to time, council would not have had the money, for example, to buy Lindley Valley. Now, maybe the delegation didn't think that was a good decision, but council did, and that was one of the reasons why we build reserves over time, is so that we have some flexibility to take advantage of situations. And to respond to that question earlier about how you deal with long-term plans and change and surprises over time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Cooper.
I got confused. Are we continuing on for the remaining half hour? Or?
Well, no, I think if we have, there's 3 questions we're going to deal with here, and then we understand there were 2 delegations.
That's
and
correct.
3
They've
questions.
spoken.
Well, we've done the 2 delegations, so you're on to the 3
All right,
questions.
so the last 3 questions. The first one reads, if any of the financial plan help encourage or consider investment in Nanaimo? I've read it as it was written.
We don't have that here?
You don't.
Okay, sorry. And so could you, what was it again? I didn't.
What aspects, if any, of the financial plan help encourage or consider investment in Nanaimo? Thank you.
Councillor Kip.
Well, in the financial plan, of course, that doesn't directly relate to what bonuses we'd give people, but for example, the hotel tax reduction, DCCs in the downtown area, we want to steer growth down there. Those type of things to build incentive are economic development spending that they spend and go out to the communities and try and encourage and development in Nanaimo. So those are part of what I see.
Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would suggest that the aspects of the financial plan that encourage investment in Nanaimo are those that are pertaining to quality of life. The investment we make in our parks, the investment we make in our hospitals and our schools, in our water resources, the quality of water and the retention of water for the future. Those are what encourages investment in our community. And that, I would argue, that's why people come to live here and to do their business here.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. I'll do this by way of a very quick story. A year ago, I was invited to come to a summer evening barbecue organized by the NADC and an outfit called Innovation Island. It's the umbrella group for young high-techies and knowledge-based people. I went there, beautiful summer evening, and I saw about 20 or 30 youngish faces that I had never seen before in my life. And so I introduced myself and asked them, why Nanaimo? And apart, of course, from the fact that real estate was cheaper here than on the mainland, they talked about the prospect of getting fast ferries and being close to the big city where they want to go now and then. They certainly appreciated the investment in our green spaces and in our recreational facilities. And a bunch of other things, but culture was really big as well, to my surprise. So all those things that we invest in and that attracts and hopefully retains people are extremely important. And the ones, I know we're getting pushback on some cultural things, but it is important to make sure that we keep doing that, because the Economic Development Corporation has told us what the economic impact is of culture alone. Combined, it's up to about $140 million if you add together what we get and what the province gets. It's a huge thing to work on. And again, by example of what I just mentioned to you, that is what attracts even young people. So it's important for us to invest in those things.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more, do we?
It's actually two. The second last question reads, it's a general question, so it can go to either staff or council. It reads, does the city plan to monitor Nanaimo's watershed more closely by hiring full-time staff who will be in close contact with the city to ensure our water supply remains clean and safe?
Staff may have a comment on this. The watershed is actually confined within a timber lease. And I'm not sure, is it Island Timberlands that has it or Timber West? But anyway, I know they have regular patrols that go up. They are concerned as we are. But, we had a problem 2 or 3 years ago with somebody going into the watershed area and setting forest fires. I think the person was subsequently arrested and charged. But it is a concern, and I know we're trying to do something with it. The challenge is when people come along and say, such and such a community owns their own watershed, why doesn't Nanaimo? And, we can't just expropriate the land and without payment. We're obliged to pay fair market value. And the fair market value for the watershed, I understand, is a figure something like $400 million, which is well beyond our budget. But we've worked with the forest companies. They're committed to the safety as we are. And I think at this point, we are doing all we can to ensure the safety. We've got an excellent crew of people that are doing some work and surveillance as well. And maybe Mr. Hickey could expand on that.
Mayor Rattan, and further to the comments you made, we do work, as you know, closely with Island Timberlands and Timber West out there, but the city does monitor the watershed closely. We do have 2 full-time staff that are out there on a continuous basis, and we have other staff who part of their responsibility is monitoring water quality and also, more importantly, the volume of water in the watershed.
And the timber companies themselves have regular patrols too, going up and down the road. So they augment what we're doing from a security standpoint.
Yes.
Councillor Kip.
I'd also just add to what Mr. Hickey said, that it's monitored electronically through to telemetry. So they have constant readings coming to the Public Works Yard on Labio Road. It's monitored 24 hours a day by not only staff, but night supervisors. The alarms go off, people are contacted if the water levels change, if something changes. And the forestry practices in that area have changed dynamically, and they're not allowed to cut to the beach anymore, so they work quite closely with trying to protect our water quality.
Thank you.
All right, the final question. It's directed to Mayor and Council, and the question reads, will Mayor and Council send a request to the BC government to return Newcastle Island to the City of Nanaimo so they can stop the commercial enterprise planned by Waterfront Holdings and the Nanaimo First Nation? Not necessarily a budget question, but it is a final question that came in this evening.
Well, okay, when you phrase it that way, it isn't a budget question, it's a political question. And, you know, at this point, it's a provincial park controlled by the province. The province has entered into a subcontract with Nanaimo First Nations for the management of it, and I believe they're doing it in concert with the Waterfront Holdings as well. I think we see a huge potential in the future for Aboriginal tourism. First Nations and Nanaimo in particular see a wonderful opportunity to display their quality of life, their style of life, their history, their language, their customs, and they view trying to build an actual longhouse over there and some other projects. So I only speak for myself when I say I totally support what's happening now, and I totally support First Nations building their history for everyone to see. And I just find this is really off the topic. We're talking about impact on the 2015 budget, and really this doesn't have a bearing, but it's the last question, so we're going to answer it. And Councillor Patchy is going to probably have the last word.
Well, you know, I concur with you. I have to admit I'm baffled by the question in the first place. You know, I think the people of Waterfront Holdings, the Seri family, and the Nanaimo First Nation make about the best possible combination, as far as I can see, to do something worthwhile at Newcastle. You know, something that will not turn it into a Coney Island of some sort, but that will keep the natural beauty, that will explain Nanaimo history, and you know, to me, it's about the best combination that we can have as far as people and First Nation is concerned. So I don't understand the question, to be honest.
Okay. That's it. Thank you very much. So that really pretty well concludes our E-Town Hall meeting, and I just wanted to say, you know, thank you for everyone for participating, and those at home that use the social media. That's what it was all about. And for the questions locally, that's always appreciated as well. So I think we've got some very serious discussions to take place in the very near future as we embark on the as the Mayor and Council of the Day starts embarking on the 2015 budget for the year. And I think you'll find the Council will be very receptive to the concerns expressed by tonight and also the questions and concerns that are expressed on a daily basis. So thank you for participating. And with that, we don't need a motion. We can just simply
Yes, Your Worship, if I can ask you to have a motion to reconvene the...
Second. All in favor? Okay. And we now can go into our meeting, and we'll start off. Mr. Ferrero, if you would introduce the lead items, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we're going to add a delegation from Mr. Jim Golsack to item 9B. We're also going to add correspondence from Michael Harrison to item 9E. We're going to remove the following properties: 727 O'Brien Place, 5 Needham Street, 543 Nova Street from item 10D. We're also going to add a delegation, Mr. Mike Horn, to item 11B. And we're also going to add delegations from Mr. Lowery and Mr. Mike Horn to item 15A. And I believe Councillor Johnson has an addition as well to the agenda.
Yes, Your Worship. I would like to, at this point in time, defer the notice of motion I had put forward to a future council meeting upon receipt of more information regarding parkland use and lease details.
Okay, thank you. Now,
And that may impact the delegations coming forward.
Ms. Farrell?
So just for clarification to council, so we're removing 15A in its entirely?
Yes.
So that means that the two delegations that they were waiting to speak would also be removed? Is that the understanding?
That would be the intent.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move into as amended. Is there a seconder? Sorry? Yes? Okay, put your microphone on and we'll hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got a request for a late delegation of 9B, Mr. Daniel Casey from Boulevard Transportation.
Second motion.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Amended.
Amended. Change that or amended.
Revised.
Is there a seconder for all of those? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So you're recording these, Mr. Ferrero, and you'll announce that when we're going to reach that point where these people, the new delegations, will be called forward?
Yes, Your Worship.
Move adoption of the minutes of September 4th and September 8th.
That's 5A and B. Moved and second. All of those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we're now overleaf to presentations. And at the 2014 September 15th Committee of the Whole, Council invited the following two parties to come to the 2014 September 29th regular Council meeting to make presentations regarding their property tax exemption requests. We have two, 6A and 6B, and the first one is Ms. Carol O'Connor on behalf of the Pacific Care regarding a property tax exemption for 3156 Barons Road. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here to just speak to some of the incorrect assumptions or statements that were made in the appeal or the denial of the appeal for the permissive tax exemption. And one of the statements was that Pacific Care services were provided by daycare centers. And I just want to clarify that Pacific Care is a support to childcare and families that seek childcare in our community. We do not provide childcare, but support it. 80% of the clients in Nanaimo, or 80% of the population we serve is from Nanaimo. We do projects like provide assistance for childcare providers, such as training, help to get their day home ready for childcare, help them understand what quality childcare looks like. We provide a number of families with information about referral services, what's available for childcare in the community, what other services there are in the community for young families, and provide them with assistance and subsidy, getting subsidy if they need help. They have a computer access in our office. We also have a lending library, so there's a number of resources for families. Nanaimo is lucky to have this resource in the community because some of our funding comes from the government through the Ministry of Children and Family Services, and we serve from Ladysmith north, but the head office and the central services were located in Nanaimo. So Nanaimo benefits greatly by 6 full-time consultants, 3 working strictly in the region of Nanaimo, 2 in the surrounding area of Nanaimo, and 3 administrators. That salary combined is about $350,000. And if the jobs were lost in this community, that would be a loss to the community for the people that work at Pacific Care. Our satellite offices, another one of the incorrect assumptions was that this organization serves all of Vancouver Island, and that is not true. that we do receive about $500,000 from government funding to provide a ministry mandate that says that the essential part of short and long-term strategies to improve the quality, stable, and inclusive childcare is what Pacific Care and the Child Care Resource and Referral Program is mandated to do. But that within the Nanaimo office, it's centrally located, and the services are just supported through satellite offices in Campbell River and Courtenay. And we have 3 consultants that work that provide all the services for the northern part of the community. So much of the work and the infrastructure is in Nanaimo. Nanaimo also houses at Pacific Care a specific insurance program that childcare providers can access, and it's a low-cost liability insurance. We have about 1,300 clients that we serve out of our Nanaimo office. We provide about 16 workshops and 2 childcare courses last year. The number of participants were about 467 participants. These are programs for family day home providers of childcare, critical to this community that really do not make a lot of money, do not have a lot of money for training dollars, and not a lot of time. So Pacific Care does a tremendous service for those families and the community and childcare that families are accessing by providing those at a very low cost. Pacific Care is also facilitates drop-in programs at the mall, Woodgrove and Country Club Mall, both benefit from the partnership with Pacific Care, and it's our dedication to that, those weekly events that make them happen and make them available for childcare providers to network and parents to network with childcare providers. We also, the Society also donates money to events such as the Teddy Bear Picnic every year and Caring for the Caregiver, which are both events that happen in the month of May, which is Child Care Month. And these programs are solely funded by Pacific Care Society. Through the last year, we've been able to, maybe partly because of the relief we've got through the tax exemption, the prior tax exemption, but a viable program, Parent Child Mother Goose, which happened for 20 years in this community, had lost its funding, and Pacific Care has agreed to try and maintain that, and the Society has donated $8,000 to ensuring that we have 2 sessions planned for this fall and 2 for the winter. And that program immediately was full, and we had a waiting list. So it's a critical program that Nanaimo shouldn't lose. I just want to say that certainly Pacific Care struggles, the Society struggles to maintain the infrastructure of this kind of a task that we've been lucky enough to be given by the ministry. And we appreciate the tax exemption meant to being able to provide the services that we want, and there's always a need in the child care community for more help, and we would appreciate that you would consider us for future tax exemption at Barons Road.
Okay, thank you, Ms. O'Connor. There'll be some questions, I'm sure. Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. O'Connor, for coming this evening. When the committee juries the applications for the permissive tax exemptions, there are very set criteria that we have to consider very carefully as we want to ensure that those nonprofit societies that are greatly in need and do the greater good for our community are recognized. And when we looked at your application, and perhaps it was the way it was written or the way it was presented to us in the interview, we felt that there was perhaps an unfair competitive advantage being given to Pacific Childcare to other daycare more commercially operated in the city. And you have been very passionate about that tonight and saying that this was not the case. You don't actually provide daycare services, but support to daycare services. I'm not sure that was understood by the committee. As well, we understood in our interview that you did serve the greater Nanaimo area, and I'm not sure if the percentage was provided to us at that time, but you have satellites in other communities. Do you get any support or funding from those other communities to provide the service that you do in our community?
Do we get other service from those communities?
Funding. Do you get some funding?
Yes. I mean, the funding that I identified of $500,000 really is the funding that comes to Nanaimo. There is an additional $180,000 that goes to Courtenay and Campbell River. So the $500,000 is not.
So of your 460 children you serve, what percentage of those would live in Nanaimo?
I just pulled strictly Nanaimo statistics. So anything that I can share with you, I have 914 names of families receiving assistance. That's strictly out of the Nanaimo office. Childcare providing and receiving, childcare providers receiving assistance. I had 150 calls or interactions. Families receiving subsidy assistance, 531. Number of community referrals other than childcare, so that would be families that were seeking help and understanding what other resources, 652, and childcare providers borrowing resources, 84. Because we have a toy lending library that's specific to this region. Now there are the communities in Campbell River and Courtenay can access some of those borrowing resources, but their numbers would be different.
Thank you. Thank you for that information.
Can I just ask, does Pacific Care actually own the property at 3156 Barons Road?
No, we lease
It's leased.
it. Yes.
And you're just looking for exemption for the taxes that the landlord would pay?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have other locations on the island, obviously, and do you have any kind of exemption for taxes or consideration from the other areas?
Yeah, so Campbell River and Courtenay have satellite offices and we rent space there. Within the Courtenay area, it's located in a hub, and so they share sort of the resources among other childcare similar programs. So
I guess my question is, there in Courtenay, for example, do you have consideration from the city of Courtenay with a tax exemption for the areas that you use?
My understanding is that they don't pay a tax on that. They're just renting a space, and they don't have a tax bill. But certainly, those communities give gifts in kind. Pacific Care supports some of the resources for early childhood education, the training of child care providers. So those communities are supporting the work that Pacific Care does.
Okay. We got Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, I appreciate the information and to have you here. What will be the effect if you don't receive the grant in aid for your organization?
Well, the facility is quite a large facility, and then at the time when they took it on, United Way was one of the participants in sharing the cost of the lease, and United Way has moved out, so it has meant that the organization has lost some funds. I would say that at this point, if the tax bill is in the range of $15,000 to $20,000, it would probably mean that we'd have to look for another place to to reside because there's just not that amount of money in the interest, in the support of society's funds.
Thank you.
I just wondered, Mr. Swaby, do you have an idea of what the tax amount is we're talking about here? Mr. Clements? The exemption request is really in dollars and cents. How much?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. My understanding is that this organization doesn't actually occupy 100% of the property, that they lease a portion of it out. And during the application, they indicated that they occupied 87.5% of the property. The taxes on that property would be about $14,000, of which the city's portion would be about $9,000.
Okay. Councillor Kipp, any comments, any thoughts from council? How would you like to proceed in this?
If I could ask another question.
Go ahead. Yeah. Councillor Johnson.
You indicated that 85% of your clientele are Nanaimo, or greater Nanaimo area. Would you then be able to manage if you received a permissive tax exemption of 85%?
It certainly would help, and certainly help to make some decisions about.
To understand, of course, that the Nanaimo taxpayers are not mandated or should not be paying taxes for services provided people outside our area. So if that might be a suggestion that I could put to this council for consideration.
You know, the age-old balance is that, and you've heard the people here tonight, they're saying, what are you going to do to cut costs and cut overhead and reduce expenses? And this is the dilemma we go through, because I for one, think the service you provide, that Pacific Care does, is exceptional. It's a great service. And yet we have people saying, well, what are you doing to actually reduce our overhead and to cut our costs? And you know, it's difficult to try to provide financial services, even when it's worthy, without impacting the bottom line of our budget. And that's always the challenge we're trying to work with. But we have Councillor Brennan. Sorry?
What I would just want to extend to the Nanaimo community is how critical services for young children and families are, and that I know that there's a draw on the resources, but that if you want dollar investment and the extension of success for young families and children, it requires an investment.
We understand. Councillor Brennan.
I'd move that we receive the delegation.
Okay, move second. No further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you, ma'am. We'll
then
work on
I
that
would
one.
make,
Sorry?
and
Go
then
ahead.
I would make a motion. 85%. I would move that we add Pacific Childcare onto the property tax exemption bylaw for 3156 Barons Road.
Okay, the delegation could be seated now if you wish. Okay, is there a seconder for that?
I would second.
You're going to second?
And then
Discussion?
I'll speak
Sorry?
to it if I could.
Go ahead.
I think what the delegation said is really important in terms of the earlier discussion we've been having about attracting business. How do you attract business? How do you attract young people, young families? And you do it by making sure that when they come to your city to work, they aren't in desperation of finding safe, but quality childcare too. And the Pacific Childcare organization, and maybe not doesn't ensure quality, but it sure goes a long way to making those things that are necessary to have quality childcare available to the childcare centers. Particularly, I'm thinking of the toy lending, so that you circulate through toys for kids, so that that when they get to the childcare center, there's new stuff to do. It's an interesting place to be. Families are more likely to are looking for that kind of childcare. We passed a motion not that long ago, and I think it was unanimous, that we asked the province to institute the $10 a day daycare fee in this province, so that families could access childcare. So we recognized some time ago that childcare was absolutely essential to people. Without good quality childcare, I don't think we'll have the kind of economic development that we want. We certainly won't have a younger population moving here if the situation is that the childcare that's available is scarce, that there is no degree of quality that you can count on, that it may not be safe. So those are, when you look at a nonprofit like that, and you say, well, you know, it's just a drain on the taxpayer, I think we have to be smarter than that and look at how it builds up our community so that it attracts business here and doesn't make business flee. And I know that everybody here almost has had children and has worked and knows the agony you go through if your childcare arrangements fall through on any given day, or if you're starting September and you don't have your childcare in place. So these are really important things. They're really important things for communities to have in place. And giving a permissive tax exemption for this kind of nonprofit is smart business. I think it's wise, and I think not to do it is unwise, because I think that it speaks to being unprepared to accept young families here.
Okay, the only question I have, and there may be others that want to raise it, is that how do we have, Mr. Clements, an assurance that if some consideration is given on this particular site, that the Pacific Care would be the beneficiary? The landlord, obviously, will be receiving the credit back, and do we have some kind of clarity that the monies that are saved by the owner will in fact be to the advantage of the tenant?
Yes, Your Worship. We insist that the organization provide us with a letter from the landlord committing to pass the benefit on to the organization, and I can pretty much assure you that if it didn't happen in the second year, we'd be hearing from the organization. So.
I'm sure. Okay, Councillor Bestwick.
Question to staff for Councillor Johnson. Has Pacific Care received a permissive tax exemption in the past?
They did in the last round, Your Worship.
They did? And their qualification changed because that it was understood that some of their work was done outside our boundary?
That was the understanding of the committee at the time, but I think that's been clarified this evening. The permissive tax exemptions are reviewed every 3 years, as Council knows, and there's oftentimes different people that come and represent themselves at the committee. We often ask for interviews and to try and jury the requests.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor, and
Yes, Your Worship. Perhaps I can read the motion and clarify, because I didn't catch the 85%, so I'll read what I have here and then you can correct me. So what I have is moved and seconded that Council award a permissive tax exemption for the 2015 tax year to the Pacific Child and Family Enrichment Society at 3156 Barons Road, at the proposed bylaw number 7201 be amended to reflect this addition.
And the exemption, I understand, was 85% of...
And that's what I'm seeking clarification. I didn't understand what that meant. Yeah.
Property tax would be forgiven.
While you're doing that calculation, Councillor Patchy.
No, I've done my calculation.
Oh, no, I think they were doing the calculation on that. Okay, question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next presentation is Ms. Hildy Schlosser, Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society, regarding the property tax exemption for their property at 101-319 Selby Street. Ms. Schlosser, welcome.
Thank you. Hildy Schlosser, 111 Wall Street. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Graham Pike, our Vice President of the Board of Directors. I need a little help this time.
Reinforcements. Good.
The city has, you've all received a letter that our Board of Directors has written, and I'm not going to read the whole letter again unless you want us to. I imagine that's a matter of record. So Dr. Pike and I would like to make a few points, highlighting some of the things said in the letter, maybe something else as well. One of the reasons that we're speaking to this, as well as having written the letter, where we made, I think we answered some of the issues that the committee seemed to have, but was to make sure that there is on record, as was at the last meeting when I saw the video and read the recommendation from the committee, a clarification, because there was a statement from the committee that said we want to reduce their dependency or their reliance on city funding. And that gives the community the impression, I think, that we are reliant on city funding in many different ways or from different sources, when in fact, the tax exemption is the only funding we receive from the city, except maybe the odd $500 when we partnered on an anti-racism event together. So I just want that to be a matter of record. We do not receive other city funding.
Okay, maybe before Dr. Pike starts, can we just get an idea of what dollar exemption we're discussing here for that property at 319 Selby Street?
Yes, Your Worship. The total property taxes, the value of the exemption would be $23,000. Now, the committee recommended to make it 50%, so that would be a reduction of $11,500, and that's the.
I don't think that's the whole amount for the whole bill. Is that the amount for the whole building? Because from our landlord, that's not what I understood. That their amount, including their residential suite and we have 9/16 of the building, we don't own the building, that their amount is less than that, significantly less than that, from what I understand. So I'm not sure how ours would be $22,000.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to respond to that, Your Worship. I looked up the property taxes earlier today on the.
So for clarity, are we still talking about a 50% reduction on that?
That's correct. The value of the 50% reduction, and by my calculations, would be about $7,200 for the city's portion, $11,500 for the total portion.
So what you had on your schedule last meeting 2 weeks ago indicated 50% of $14,000?
That's correct, Your Worship. It was 50% of the city's portion of the taxes that appears on the schedule.
Okay.
So what's in consideration is the other 50%, the other half.
Councillor Bennett.
Yeah, maybe we should clarify for the delegation that it's just the city's taxes, not the school district and the RDN and stuff. Maybe that accounts for the difference?
Well, basically what it is, we can only exempt our own taxes, the city of Nanaimo portion.
Right.
We collect for a lot of other areas, and we can't.
Well, I really don't know, because we're actually never given the information. So when we have been receiving the tax exemption for many years, other than the year when we moved into our new building in 2011, and the exemption didn't go with us. But we usually don't, I have never received information directly from the city to let us know how much that tax exemption was. So I don't know.
You should ask,
Well, yes, but
I do need to know what amount we're talking about now. And if you're looking for exemption on it, do we have that figure available for clarity?
$7,200, Your Worship, is the amount that's being discussed.
And you're in agreement?
$7,200 is the 50% or the full amount?
That's 50% of the city's portion of the taxes of this exemption. Now, their landlord would actually pay more taxes because there's portions of the building that they don't occupy.
So roughly $14,000 is the amount for our facility. Is that? I just want to make sure I'm understanding that, which is what I thought. and that the committee's recommendation was 50% of that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to follow up by making a couple of points. One is that I think the activities of the Multicultural Society actually save the city a lot of money in terms of the various services provided that would otherwise need to be provided by the city. And I'm thinking of services such as the language support for newcomers to Canada that enables our immigrants to play a much more constructive role in the community. Also, the employment counselling and preparation for the workforce that enable newcomers to find employment and therefore contribute to economic development of the community, as well as the new program, the HIPPY program, which provides training for parents of preschool youngsters so that they can be better prepared for schooling in the community and therefore be more successful. So all of these services, which are all funded by external grants, are actually contributing to the economic development of the community. I think the other point is that, whilst I agree with Councillor Johnston that that tax exemption, one of the criteria for tax exemption should be financial need. It seems to me that another criteria ought to be those not-for-profits that are fiscally responsible and competently run. Because otherwise it appears to be rather punitive for organizations that are extremely well run, as I believe the Multicultural Society is, to then find that they're actually having their tax exemptions cut back because of that, because of the way that they run the organization. So that seems to me to be another criteria that should be taken into account.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Brennan, you're on.
Sure, thank you. I'd like to ask you just a couple of questions. Ms. Schlosser, the funds that you have built up in reserves, what are they for?
Well, a little bit like I heard about an hour ago with the city budgets, you never plan to have any surplus. And sometimes you do, and you need that money for when you don't have enough. You need it for other unexpected events. You need it to continue to shore up your infrastructure. For us in particular, many of our contracts and most of our funding, we hold a number of different contracts, primarily from government, but not all from government, that we have bid on and secured through bidding processes. Organizational capacity carries something like 50-60% weight on a contract bid these days for the kinds of services we provide, and that includes our financial capacity. For example, we hold a $1.3 million contract with the federal government, and we had to demonstrate that we could carry a quarterly cash flow on that. So that's just one of our contracts, because every contract pays differently. We have to demonstrate that we not only have financial stability, that we operate in an effective manner and are viable, that we're not going to go under the day after they give their first payment to us. But we have to depend on having enough money in the bank to pay our staff and our rent and everything else until we get a payment on that contract, which in this particular case is every quarter. In some of other contracts, it's about 40 days, it can be 60 days, it can be any number of times. So cash flow is important.
Okay, we've got a question, Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, thank you very much. Without this grant, how will it affect your business operations?
Well, I would be lying if I said we'd go under without this grant. However, without this grant, it would indicate that the city doesn't feel it has a vested interest in the work that we do, that the many collaborations and partnerships that we have had is the extent of the support we get, and that we are not valuable to this community in any real sense other than in name. And that in itself, I think, would be rather a sad comment. I have a lot of colleagues around the province, and I know that there are many, many municipalities that support many of the services that immigrant settlement organizations provide in ways other than tax exemptions. We don't come to the city for other money. So in reality, it would be very disappointing. And I really have to tell you this too. We had a good year last year. We had a $2.2 million budget because we juggled 10 contracts. And in September 2013, we had to give notice of termination to every one of our 28 staff, because at the end of March 2014, only our 2 smallest contracts were assured to be renewed. And it was end of February, early March, before we had any idea if we had anything more than that. And it was the last week of March before we knew we wouldn't have an $80,000 to $100,000 deficit this year. So if we have money in the bank, it's to make sure we can survive.
Well, I might just say that, I don't want to leave you with the feeling that the city and certainly this council isn't very supportive of all the work that you do at the Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society. It's a great organization, and I've been there on a number of occasions. I've met a number of the people that you help, and I know you do a great job. So it isn't, that we're just trying to be open and ask questions and get answers back, but that shouldn't in any way indicate to you that there's a lack of support. We've got to balance our costs as much as we can, and I think that's basically where we're at. I'm supportive in principle because I think it's a good project that you've got. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you.
You have to, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Slosser. Over the last couple of years, some, if not all, federal services that are connected with your work and your organization have moved off island.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
How has that affected you?
Well, Citizenship and Immigration Canada closed their offices a couple of years ago here in downtown Nanaimo. Since then, we've seen up to 20 to 30 people a week looking for the kind of support that they were getting from them. Of course, we can't provide it all, but we have to help them navigate the processes. CIC has set up a website. If you don't speak English and you don't understand our culture and you don't know what somebody is talking about, how do you navigate a website or call an 800 number? I saw a comment once in the paper when we said how much extra work that said, and they said, oh, big deal, what's 30 more people? Well, 30 more people at how many hours each? 2, 3, maybe 5, maybe 6, depending on how many times they have to come back to get the information. So it's added significantly to our workload, as well as many of the issues that happen in this city that aren't really part of our funding. Incidents of racism and hate, committees that we're asked to sit on, information we're called upon to provide to the city, to city staff, and participation in efforts to attract and retain immigrants to this community. So there's an awful lot of work that we do that is not really counted in any of our contracts, and that comes through money we fundraise and get through donations and so on.
Okay, Councillor, you're done. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Schlauser, I wanted to press upon you that the committee recognizes the important role that the Multicultural Society plays in the community. We do try to follow the criteria very closely, And if the criteria that is written that the organization must meet, demonstrate financial need, is not something this council wants to refer to or have us work towards, then I think that that should be stated. However, if we follow the community charter, section 224 of the community charter, it clearly states that council is permitted to, but not required, to exempt organizations from property taxation.
Could I just quote from your application for permissive tax exemption? It says, if the application meets the requirements, the committee will then evaluate the application on the basis of financial need, appropriateness, and service provided to the local community. And I think the second two should not be forgotten. It's really hard. I have been loath to say this. There were 96 locations, I think, 94 of which were singled out or pulled out. So I find it very hard to believe, because I know there are organizations in this city that are 2, 3, 4 times the size we are, that they barely operate, like that they barely make their bills every month, that they are so in dire need that the $15,000 or $10,000 that they get from the city is going to make or break them. I hope that there is a process of equity, and if the process is because of the 96, if they are all in financial need, then I think that that's the process you should follow. If you are looking at other criteria, then I think that that's the process you should follow.
Okay, good. Councillor Brennan, did you?
Yeah, the thing I wanted to clarify was, I think in your letter, or maybe even in a conversation we had, you said that you thought the committee had thought you were renting out half your space and that you weren't. Now, have you sorted that out at all?
When we're asked to submit budgets, it's 2 years ahead. We're asked to give you a couple of budgets. Well, we knew that we had several contracts ending, and so we didn't know where we were going to get the rest of the money to pay the rent and so on. So we put in rental. That was a projected budget 2 years ahead. We don't and have not rented out space. In fact, we share space with other nonprofits. We give them free space for meetings because we know we have a great facility for meetings. If a nonprofit comes to us, they don't pay us to use meeting space or workshop space. There was an agency in town that's a new startup agency. We had an empty office because of the end of a contract this last year, and we gave them the empty office to use for 9 months and to help them get on their feet. And so it's not as though we serve the community and we work with the community, and we are also as generous as we can be to our partners in the community with our information, our support, and even our space.
Okay. So to council, what's your pleasure on this? Anyone?
I'll move that we receive the delegation.
Okay. Second. All those in favor? Thank you very much.
And then I would add, I'm not sure really what the result of all these discussions was about how much is the tax, property tax that applies to what they occupy.
So maybe to keep it simple, they're currently on the permissive tax exemption roll at 50%, and that's around $7,200 for the city's portion of taxes. If you wanted to change that, you'd make a motion to put them on at 100%, and that would be another $7,200. So take it to 14,000.
What I'm still not clear on is how the 50% was arrived at. Was it arrived at because they were at one time renting out half the space, or was that based on their landlord and them?
No, my understanding, having been at the committee meeting and listened to the discussion, was that it was strictly based on they were trying to transition the organization from being fully exempt to potentially being less exempt, and it had nothing to do with space utilization.
So what was the last year's exemption? What was the cash value of it?
It was about $14,000.
then I would move that the multicultural, Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society be added to the property tax exemption bylaw, 7201, to exempt the city portion of their taxes.
But are you, is this 50% are we talking about now?
No, it's the full amount,
100%?
because that's
Okay, just for
their,
clarity.
they don't rent it, they don't derive an income from it.
Okay,
It's
just
their
wanna get
space.
clear.
And I just want to say that every year now, we partner with the Multicultural Society, and we hold a reception, a welcome reception, to welcome new immigrants to our city and to thank them for choosing Nanaimo. And we could not do that if we didn't have the Multicultural Society as a partner. They have put together the list of all the new immigrants. They use volunteers to contact them. They work very hard to make sure that our reception is a success. And the idea that they're sort of fat cats and flush with money is incorrect, because we probably, most of us know here, that the federal government isn't as responsive as they could be in terms of timing. And so they need to have money in the bank to deal with the outcome if the feds, in the end, decide not to continue funding a program or not to award them a contract. So I think this is money well spent, and it's troubling because I know that there are other organizations who are on the permissive tax exemption bylaw that don't demonstrate severe need. Right? They demonstrate, I think, a real asset to our community, but the severe need is not demonstrated in every single one of those. I find that hard to believe. So.
Okay. Well, for my part, I support it. I think that the Vancouver Island Multicultural Society does an incredibly good job with the resources available. And, I think it's consistent. We've granted Pacific Care on appeal, and I think it would be fairly hard to approve one and deny the other, because I'm very much aware of the good work of the Multicultural Society, and I'm supporting it. Councillor Patchy?
Thank you, Worship. I just want to put some extra emphasis on what Ms. Schlosser said as far as the function was concerned, and she mentioned the word racism. You and I and Councillor Johnstone and Councillor McKay, as recently as last week, were at Maffeo Sutton Park, where we try to help celebrate Saudi National Week. And what a special occasion it was. I didn't hear until later that some of the Saudi men who were walking around setting up that particular venue, dressed in their Saudi Arabian dress and garb, were subjected to some pretty nasty racist observations here in our city. And, if nothing else, that is our responsibility to deal with one way or the other. So that fact alone would make me vote in favor of this.
Okay. Now, I think, Mr. Farrow, that if Council should decide on both, on the vote, we've accepted one, then there will be a requirement to amend the 9A property tax exemption bylaw.
Yeah, that's correct, Your Worship. We can deal with that when we get to that item. But at this moment, I have a mover, but I didn't have a seconder for this motion. Good, thank you.
Councillor, didn't you second?
No, it was Ted and I.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We got it, thank
Councillor
you.
Greaves, sorry. Okay. Well, let's call a question. I see no further questions on it. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move into the Mayor's report now, and I have two things that I want to just briefly cover. One of them is, well, they're both good news, of course. One is they just actually got word today that we have basically a $2 million of economic impact was generated by the Nanaimo 2014 BC Summer Games. And we received some information from BC Summer Games in Vancouver. Kelly Mann, the president and CEO, that the city, the Harbour City and the surrounding area realized about $2 million in a commission that they studied and put together. And it goes on, spending by the BC Summer Games organizers was $821,700, while participants, spectators, and volunteers contributed another $1.147 million, for a total of just $1,968,700. The majority of that spending was reflected in accommodation and meals by out-of-town visitors. And during the Games weekend in mid-July, area hotels reported being sold out as guests and visitors came to Nanaimo to support the Games. And just some quick stats I'll read through included the average spending per person was $96.91. And the 48% of all spectators came from off Vancouver Island, which I found interesting. Visitor accommodation accounted for $195,918. Restaurant meals accounted for $122,160. And important to the province of British Columbia, I'm sure, $161,433 was generated in provincial taxes. So I just want to say a big, huge thank you to everyone involved in the BC Summer Games. And later on, and I'm not sure, maybe 2 meetings now, maybe 2 weeks from now, we're going to have the people responsible for putting that all together. And Jeff Lott, who was our chair and did an outstanding job, and his whole crew will be here to receive recognition for the effort they did. So it's all good news, I think, and they did an incredible job. And really, for anyone who had the opportunity to take in even some of the games, it was really a well-organized event. I sure enjoyed it, and I think everyone else that went did it as well. Okay, now the other thing I wanted to mention is that I just want to confirm the appointment of Councillor George Anderson to the Youth Advisory Council as the council's representative. And so Councillor Anderson will be commiserating with the young people that will be sitting on the committee. They've already been appointed. And I think that, did you have something, you raised your eyebrows like you were going to say something of interest? Maybe not. But anyway, I just wanted to thank Councillor Anderson for getting involved in it. This is, again, an opportunity. Other people, I think, asked earlier tonight what's being done to attract more younger people to get involved in politics. And I think this youth council that we've set up is going to address a lot of it. And I've met all of the young people that are committed on it, and I think it's going to be an excellent opportunity for them to look at some of the courses as we put them on, some of the council sessions, rather, as we put them on, and render their own opinion on it. So, all well and good.
Your Worship?
Yes.
Can I say something?
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I should have piped up a little earlier before you started talking about the youth
That's okay.
committee, but I wanted to express my thanks to Councillor Johnston for the work that she did on the games, the summer games.
Yes.
Because we were asked tonight about, you know, the amount of work that it takes to be a councillor. Well, Councillor Johnston is a councillor here. She's a director at the regional district, and so, you know, that is a lot of work. And on top of that, she met the request to work on the summer games. And I saw her, and many times I said to her, "You got to stop this. This is really tiring." But she just soldiered on, and I wanted to give my personal thanks to her for that.
Well done, and I totally agree with you. Here's the thank you. She really did, and thank you for mentioning that. And I was remiss in not doing that. Every time I went to the games, Councillor Johnson was always there, whether the sun was up or the sun was down. She was there. I don't know the number of hours you put in, but
It's
it was
all for love of community.
well, good for you.
I love my people.
Okay, so we'll move into corporate services, 9A, property tax exemption bylaw, and now we do have to go, or can we automatically include the two we've just approved?
So, Your Worship, your first motion should be to receive the information report. And then when you move to the readings of the bylaw, I would suggest that you add the word amended after the number.
Okay. So if someone would like to move that, move, and second? Second? Okay. It's all in favor. Opposed? Motion carries. And now, in the bylaw, and we'll specify that this will also include in the first, second, and third readings those two properties identified as 3156 Barons Road and 101 319 Selby Street?
Yes, that's correct. And you have to do it one at a time, Your Worship.
Okay, sorry, Adam.
Yeah. Yes.
So the motion is that property tax exemption bylaw 2014 number 7201 to exempt certain lands and buildings from taxation, but does include the two properties previously identified past first reading. Second. Moved and seconded? Did he say second? Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
I move that property tax exemption bylaw 2014 number 7201 as amended past second reading.
Does that include the two properties? Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And third?
that property tax exemption bylaw 2014 number 7201 as amended past third reading.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into development permit DP 877 at 1680/1690 Townsite Road. Purpose to obtain council authorization to issue a development permit for the two buildings, a 4-story mixed-use building on Lot A and a 5-story mixed-use building with proposed height variance on Lot B. Parking variance is proposed for each building. We do have a delegation. Mr. Jim Goldsack is opposed. Mr. Goldsack, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jim Goldsack from 1659 Dufferin Crescent, and I'm here representing the Hospital Area Neighborhood Association. Good evening, Mayor Rattan and council members. I stand before you not to oppose the development, but to oppose the parking variance. The variance as requested by the applicant is for a total of 18 parking spaces for the two buildings. They are not just residential buildings, but commercial as well. The applicant has stated they believe the city's parking requirement is too high and compares similar buildings 253 Victoria Road, which is currently an empty lot, and 326 Wakasaya, which is currently a residential house, and 1820 Summerhill Place, which you've dealt with a few months back, and it's currently under construction. But these three buildings will be and are residential only with no commercial component. They state there'll be sharing of parking spaces between the residential and commercial tenants. A total of 73 spaces will be available, of which 64 will be allocated for residential and 9 spaces shared by commercial and visitors. The question I have is how many commercial tenants are planned for the two buildings and how many employees are they going to have? With only 9 spaces, this indicates a trend we have seen over the years. No parking for employees. They compare Metro Vancouver's reduced parking requirements, but again refer to strata condo units with no commercial component. They also refer to Metro Vancouver's transit system, which should not be compared to the Nanaimo's transit system. The area around the hospital and the surrounding neighborhood has been a problem with parking for many years, and the parking problem is spreading. The West Hill Mall, around the corner from this development, for instance, does not have enough parking. Therefore, most employees of the mall's commercial tenants must park on the street and any vacant lots in the immediate area. During the day, from Monday through Friday, between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., you will find more than 50 vehicles parked on Townsite Road, Dufferin Crescent, and on the vacant lot directly behind this lot that we're speaking of. Most of the medical buildings in the area do not have sufficient parking now. The Seven Sails Medical Building on Townsite, only meters from this proposed site, has an overflow of parking. I have been advised the new Millstone Medical Building, which is in the corner of Dufferin and Boundary, it's brand new, It does not have sufficient parking to allow staff to park, and that staff has been told, find parking off the site. My point is that here we have 2 more buildings with commercial on the lower level, and staff will likely be told to park off-site to allow for customer parking. The question is where? There is no available street parking now. I am well aware of the Nanaimo Transportation Master Plan, which identifies the hospital area as a mobility hub, but it is years away in my opinion. Right now, there is a very serious parking problem in the hospital area, and it may very well get worse should the city ignore the issue and continue to allow parking variances. Underground parking should be mandatory on any large building is constructed. This will increase the green space and reduce the size of the paved lots.
Okay, sir.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No questions. Sorry.
Thanks.
I have a question to staff, though.
Go ahead.
To Mr. Lindsay, if I may, on page 138 at the bottom and at the top of 139, there's one bullet that says on-street parking. There is some, approximately 4 to 5 spaces adjacent to the subject property. And on the top of the next page, you say the residential parking variance is effectively reduced by allowing residents to use the 6 commercial parking spaces after commercial business hours. Could you expand a bit on that, please?
Your Worship, so in terms of the first question, so I believe the author is talking about the on-street parking right in front of the property on Townsite Road. After the road improvements are completed, there'll be some opportunity for on-street parking directly in front of these buildings, approximately 4 to 5 stalls. The other is this idea of there's different peak periods for residential, for commercial. The suggestion is that in the commercial buildings, there will not be, those parking requirements are typically not in the evenings, and that will be an opportunity at that time for visitors to use those spaces, people that are visiting the residential units.
Okay. Just one follow-up. Yeah. Those 6 street parking places that you allude to, are they not now being used even before the building is constructed?
Your Worship, they're certainly there. I think the street allows for people to park there. I don't have any numbers on how often they're being used, but I would suspect that there are some people parking there at this time, yes.
Thank you.
I wonder, Mr. Lindsay, if you want to comment or can comment on the fact that the parking in that area is a very serious problem, and the concerns raised by the delegation, is there any way that we can mitigate some of this? I'm concerned as well. The whole area is a massive parking problem, and I know quite some time ago the Nanaimo Regional Hospital indicated they were looking at the possibility of putting a second tier on, which was going to be a multi-million-dollar cost. But really, I think it's incumbent on the hospital to do more than they have done in trying to ease the parking situation there, certainly for private property owners in the area. And I'm concerned too. I just don't know if this is the right thing to do to reduce a number of spaces there for this commercial enterprise.
Your Worship, I guess what I would say is staff are certainly aware that there is a parking issue in the hospital. There's no question. The hospital itself and its parking policies tend to result in on-street parking in the area that impacts residents and other businesses. What I would say is that we believe that this application has adequate parking to service their needs. It will not resolve the problem or the challenges that are in the hospital area with parking, but we do not believe it will add to them either.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, any further? Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Richard. Just further to Councillor Patrick's question as it relates to page 138 and the comment, staff's opinion, there is support for the overall parking reduction from 48 to 38 parking spaces for Building 1 and 44 to 35 for Building 2. Can you just qualify for me what you mean by there is support in staff's opinion based on?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but what I guess what I would-
The paragraph, the last paragraph on page 138, prior to site location, states, this is staff's recommendation, staff's report, in staff's opinion, there is support for the overall parking reduction from 48 to 38 parking spaces for building 1 and 44 to 35 for building 2. Can you please qualify for me how you arrived at that opinion?
Certainly, thank you. The report goes on then to say that for a number of reasons, staff are making this recommendation. It's one, because of the location of the building. It's in an area that the speaker referred to. The transportation plan talks about as a mobility hub, recognizes that in these areas we should be looking at different parking standards, but also existing access to existing services that are in close proximity to the property, and opportunities for employment that are also within this area.
So then you're making some assumptions that the people that would choose to reside here are doing so for the specific reasons of accessibility to be in a walking node, or because the transit is one bus line runs on Bowen and it's a minute walk, plus or minus, and then 5 minutes to the other run. So the comment and the opinion that this is an acceptable reduction based on its location, given the density of those other properties that surround it and the current uses and the congested areas that we've already admitted to. So we as a council and as a staff admit that the hospital area, which includes town site, has a parking issue. And we can say that it's the hospital's problem and they should build another deck, but they're not gonna anytime soon. So we're doing a parking review, I think, for VIU in the Harewood area, Wakasai and Bruce and Howard and so on, and the hospital, the neighborhood association, Dufferin and so on. How is that coming?
Your Worship, staff are coming to the microphone, but we're not doing any study of those areas that you mentioned. We're actually have been engaged in how we deal with the parking that's on the streets. So in the hospital area, for example, when we get to that, there'll be options for council to deal with the parking on the street if you so desire, by way of charging for parking on the street or limiting certain areas for parking to resident only. So that would be something that we would be looking at in the future.
So we are conducting a comprehensive parking review of those areas, and of what you just said, one of the contemplations might be to charge or eliminate for parking on the streets in those areas.
That's correct.
Mr. C, do you want to make any comment here?
Your Worship, as can be expected, there's no one solution to the problem in that area. Our first steps, which have been undertaken with our parking manager, is to do consultation with some of the stakeholders in that area. Certainly more to come, and it is one of our initiatives as we are now have established, or council has given us direction on the downtown, is to move into the hospital area and spend the next extended period of time working with that group to try and find a number of solutions that will help improve the situation.
Thank you. My last point or question, is it fair to assume that one of the solutions to densifying neighborhoods, including this one that we're talking about right now, is not to reduce the parking requirements?
Again, that could be one of the solutions, but as every variance application comes before council, it has to be considered, will the variance being considered worsen the problem in that area. And I think staff have previously mentioned they don't believe it will worsen, that this development will not make the situation worse. It won't make it better either. But that's what the goal is for staff, and bring forward recommendations to council of how to best bring many options forward to help improve. And I keep emphasizing the word improve, because every hospital area in most the communities have this problem, and in a lot of cases put tiered parking in, which, as the mayor mentioned, is very expensive.
Your Worship, I think it's quite the opposite, actually. As areas actually densify, and Nanaimo does not have any areas that are nearly as dense as larger communities, you'll see less and less parking requirements that are required as you get very dense. So we're in this transition that we're sort of medium density, and there's a push and pull for parking for sure, but I think as you move forward to higher densities, you will see less parking.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Mr. Chair, we do have another delegation on this matter. We seem to be debating it right now.
Okay.
Well, I stand corrected, but I'd like to hear the other delegation before we carry on this conversation.
The delegation is?
Yeah, delegation is Mr. Daniel Casey, I believe.
Mr. Casey, do you want to come forward, sir?
Good evening. My name is Dan Casey, and I represent Boulevard Transportation Group out of Victoria, transportation planner. And I have had the chance to speak here before. So we were asked to do a parking study of the site. The site is for 49 multifamily residential units and approximately 3,000 square feet of commercial at the ground floor. Our review looked most closely at the residential requirement. So the required rate in the bylaw is 1.66 stalls per residential unit. And the proposal is to bring that down to, give or take, 1.3 per unit. So it's this 1.3 that we set out to study to figure out if that's an appropriate supply rate for multifamily residential on this site. So we looked at precedent sites that have been approved here in the city. We're also aware of numerous others in other communities as well. We looked for available research to figure out if this 1.3 can be supported by actual observed parking demand at comparable type sites. And we actually look to your own transportation master plan, which talks about mobility hubs. It puts a lot of emphasis into mobility hubs, which is, in my opinion, a good way to be going, and one way that a lot of communities are going. And the transportation plan talks about, in these mobility hubs, about looking at accepting reduced parking supplies, knowing that there's going to be increasing options for people to travel other than just by vehicle. And it also talks about mixing land uses and the potential for sharing parking supplies among most typically commercial and residential land uses, which require their parking, or they experience demand for their parking at different times of day. Based on those items, we are supportive. We find that the 1.3 stalls per unit is an appropriate rate for multifamily land use on this site, and that the total supply that's being proposed is appropriate as well.
Okay, sir. I see just one question. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. So I appreciate, Daniel, the knowledge. I've got your stuff in front of me here. 91 spaces reduced down to 73, so an 18 reduction. 64 would be used for the residents, 9 for the commercial. And you say you don't know what commercial would be in there, so you don't know their hours of operation. But typically, they won't be opened at night. Is that your?
Typically, they won't. Yeah. Well, from what I understand, they're going to be smaller commercial sort of units in the bottom.
You said 3,000 was about 3,500 square foot of commercial on it.
Yeah.
What about the loading zones with the commercial there? I mean, in that area, that road area is busy. It is obviously a busy area with the growth in that area. These plans have been on the works in this area for 20 years to develop that area. But why no loading zone for commercial?
Yeah, I can't speak to that specifically, but loading zones are funny because, commercial is quite a general, a lot of types of operations and businesses fall under commercial.
Broad spectrum.
Some of them need loading, many of them do not. So I guess I can't speak to this one specifically, but oftentimes you'll see loading zones being not utilized because the types of commercial activities or industrial or whatever it might be don't end up needing it in the end, especially when you talk about turnover over time.
Well, as long as, like say, people moving into the residential units need some loading and unloading area too. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Greaves.
Your Worship, I don't have a question for the delegation. I was waiting for the debate and...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can move receipt of the delegation.
Yes, move receipt of the delegation.
And second. All those in favor? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Councillor Greaves?
Yes, Your Worship. Parking is a problem almost everywhere in this city. I know I lived in a condo on the north end of Hecate Street, and the first thing I did when I bought the condo is I asked how many parking spaces do I have, and they said 1, so I had 1 car. If they had said 2, possibly I would have had 2 cars, but I only have 1 car. So I imagine that's what you would think about if you were to buy one of these residential units. You would figure out how many cars you can have, and that would be that. I live on Davies Lane now, and parking is a huge problem because it's a cul-de-sac. There's a couple that has 3 cars, 2 people that have 3 cars, and not to mention a boat and this and a that. So, and I lived on Protection Island, or I had a place on Protection Island, and the problem was when you came across, where do you park over here and get your car? So parking is not just a problem for the hospital area. It's not just a problem for VIU. It's a problem all over the city. And I think you're going to see more and more of that, or perhaps less and less with the transportation master plan, with the transit and all that stuff, and bikes and walking. People are going to get more into that than driving vehicles. So if you've got 25 residential units and you've got 38 on-site parking spaces, that leaves 13 that are free for other things. So I think my point is that parking is a problem anywhere, and by the way, streets are to be parked on. I mean, that's what streets are for cars to drive on, or bikes, and to park on, and it's all over the city. So I don't think you can just nail down one specific spot, and I'll be in support of this permit.
So I guess if you'd gone to that first apartment and they said you have 5 spaces, I don't know how you would handle that.
I'd rent the other 4 out.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I watched with great interest the debate on the Summerhill project and the request for exemption from Mr. Molnar, the developer. And when I looked at that one, I thought, at the end of the day, it appears to me that we do have 2 major problems in the hospital area. One is the hospital itself. Our staff tell us that there's, at one point, there can be upwards of 1,700 people working there, and they have 700 parking spaces. So it doesn't surprise anybody that there's a challenge with parking. University is the same way, as is the Departure Bay Ferry Terminal. They all contribute to parking problems on the streets. However, West Hill, I believe, is a problem when the landlord mandates that employees cannot park on the surface parking on the property, as was intended. The one next door, Summerhill, appears to me that there's going to be excess parking there. And there may be an opportunity for them to lease parking spaces to Summerhill. But what we're missing here is that Councillor Greaves and I, we're the dinosaurs. Our house, there's 3 people that live there and there's 3 cars. The millennials, only 25% of them own cars. They're going the opposite direction. In the U.S., of all places, when for every car that's being sold,
There is no motion at this point. Would somebody like to move? Yeah.
I would move that council issue development permit under DP 877 at 1680/1690 Townsite Road, Plot A and B, respectively. And do I need to read each one of those?
No, I don't think so, because it's printed before us now.
All right, so
But,
I move it as
is-
printed, and then I defer to the rest of
Moved and seconded.
council to debate.
Okay. So now that we have a motion, Councillor McKay, do you want to speak?
Might I carry on?
Yep.
Thank you.
Are you in favor or opposed the motion now that it's on the floor?
In the U.S., for every car that's being sold right now, there's 3 bicycles being sold. We're the dinosaurs. If this building's going to be in the air for 100 years, I would suggest, as our city manager suggested earlier, that the demand for parking, if the hospital can ever get their act together, is going to go down. And I'm in favor of the DVP.
Okay. Councillor Kipp.
I mean, when I hear there isn't parking or there's parking problems everywhere, sometimes I think that's driven by the cost of parking. In downtown, we have 6,000 parking spots used at some 40% of all the private. So what I will say that this is a traffic generation area, and we have a few of those, and I think council's mentioned them, like the BC Ferries is a traffic generator. Any ferry terminal, any transit hub, and any mobility center like this with the hospital, it generates a lot of traffic 24 hours a day. Ambulances run in and out and that. I have a concern, like I hear that we're all reducing the number of cars. I don't see car lots being reduced in Nanaimo. All of us drove here. None of us rode a bicycle today. The weather was lousy. You know, it's interesting. We're building pigeonholes for people to work in are not much bigger than a car, 29 square meters, right? So my concern with these is we seem to having one-offs all the time, one-off, picking away. Maybe we need to change our parking structure. After coming back from a holiday in Europe and watching how people park over there, no one really cares, no one gets upset. People park both directions, trucks pull over, they deliver on the street, in walking streets and everything. I think we spend an inordinate amount of time worrying about our car and the parking spots and that. These reductions seem large for me in this area, but again, I guess it goes to what is our real mandate with the future, our transportation master plan. Are we going to build some bike lanes? You know, I'm more concerned, I guess, with the neighborhood's concerns of this because it just keeps getting piled on in that area. And like I say, Vancouver Health Authority will not spend money on parking. They want to spend money on health. So this is a tough one for me because it's just another one that's picking away, especially at that area. The density is getting big in there, and the roads, they're always busy with cars. I think it slows traffic down. It's actually not a bad thing, but so this is a tough one for me when I start to see a massive reduction that's just based on what we think is the new parking standard. We don't have proof of it yet. So.
Okay.
And I have 3 cars, and only 2 of us drive.
Councillor Brennan, did you?
Yes, I would. Yes, thanks. I think when we make these decisions, we make them. We should be making them, I think, in reference to our guiding documents that we have. Guiding document being the official community plan, the sustainability climate action plan, and the transportation master plan. And they all tell us that we have agreed to these principles. These are the principles that we want to reference when we're making decisions about how we're going to build our city out. And you know, the presiding document is the official community plan, and it tells us that we want communities that offer safe and convenient opportunities to walk, cycle, and take transit. It also tells us that we need to approach this with increased housing density to generate a population base that will support commercial services, other utilities, and the provision of public transit. It also tells us that we want to pay attention to these principles when we're building neighborhoods. So I think that's quite powerful in terms of what we have decided. to use to guide us on these kinds of questions, because these kinds of questions become the values of the council. And we shouldn't say these things and then pay no attention to them later. I think the Transportation Master Plan tells us that. We have an opportunity in the 2015 regional district budget to increase the amount of transit. We have, I believe, an intention to do that. And so when we say things like, well, Nanaimo's not there yet, well, Nanaimo will never get there yet if we always hesitate, if we always pull back, if we always defer to the car. So we can do it. It's within our reach, and it's, just a few months away when we can work on increasing our transit budget at the RDN. And I'm sure that Councillor Anderson knows that only too well and is looking forward to it. So let's not just talk the talk, let's walk the walk and make sure that we pay attention to the guiding principles that we put in place month after month.
Okay, Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Well, walking the walk and talking the talk is something that, as far as the hospital neighborhood is concerned, I've been aware of since I've been on council. It's almost 6 years. It was a problem when I came here first, and it's still very much a problem. And I have not seen the kind of improvement that I would like to have seen by now without exacerbating what really is a bad situation. If I lived in that neighborhood, I'll give you an example. I was at a doctor's office today. Before I even got to see the man, the secretary was getting at me because she couldn't get her car out of the driveway this morning because it's it's blocked by overparking. So, whether it's 10 spaces or 9 spaces or 6, there's a principle involved here, and I want to see some improvements somewhere before I can vote for this, so I will not be supporting at this point.
So, has everyone made up their mind? Are they prepared to vote now before we go around? Okay, so let's call the question on it. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor Patchy, Councillor Anderson, Councillor Kipp, and Councillor, bless you, and Councillor Bestwick opposed. The balance of council in favor, so the motion passes. Development permit DP 897 at 3000 Keeley Road. Purpose to obtain council authorization to issue a development permit in order to allow for renovation of a single-family dwelling, including replacement of the existing foundation within the watercourse setback area. And the staff recommendation is that a motion the council issue the development permit. Anyone?
Move the staff recommendation.
Okay, moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into D, development permit DP 901 at 178 Westwood Road. Purpose to obtain council authorization to issue a development permit in order to remove an existing house, construct a new house, and erect a 1.8 meter fence. Moved and seconded. Discussion none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Overleaf, item E is development variance permit DBP 217 at 680 Trans-Canada Highway, BC Ferries. Purpose to inform council of the public consultation process undertaken regarding the proposed signage and to obtain council authorization to vary the provisions of the sign type and area within the City of Nanaimo sign bylaw 2850 in order to permit 3 LED signs at the Departure Bay Ferry Terminal. We do have 3 delegations, and the first delegation is the Brecken Hill Community Association. And if somebody who's here would like to come down and speak to it. Welcome, sir.
Hello, my name is Dan Lyons, 660 Beach Drive. Good evening. I'd like to thank Mayor Rattan and Council for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight as a director of the Brecken Hill Community Association. I'll start by stating my purpose for being here with you. We, the Brecken neighborhood, ask that our City Council reject DVP 217, a request for an LED sign variance by BC Ferries for the Departure Bay Ferry Terminal for 2 reasons. First, traffic concerns, and second, the negative impact on the neighborhood by blocking views, increasing light pollution, and reducing property values and saleability. In support of our opposition to this variance, we have 3 letters of support to add to the many written by our neighbors. One is from our MLA, Honorable Leonard Krogh. One from the Horseshoe Bay Business Association, who will be the next to fight this LED blight in their neighborhood. And last but not least, by the Brecken Hill Community Association. And we thank everyone for their support. Surely our city bylaws and guidelines must be in place for good reasons. Maybe to keep us safe and our neighbors safe. Maybe to help keep our city beautiful. Maybe to control signage that would be an affront to the senses. In any case, as I researched variances, I found that most information mentioned that variances should be granted sparingly, especially ones that may create a precedence which could negatively impact our city in the future. Note that BC Ferries has applied for a variance using a development variance permit. And I quote from the sign bylaw document that says, the use of the development variance permit is a relatively new option, which, if not dealt with in a consistent manner, could lead to total disregard for the intent of sign regulations. Now, BC Ferries is asking for 3 very large LED signs where only 1 is allowed by the bylaws and guidelines. So that's 3 in place of 1. BC Ferries is also asking that those 3 signs each be double the size of allowed by our current bylaws and guidelines. So that's double what for each sign. The budget for these signs in Departure Bay is slated to be $300,000, likely the same in Horseshoe Bay once they get our Brecken neighborhood and Departure Bay illuminated. This includes future residential developments slated for the cement plant and tank farms, which are going to be in direct line with these signs. If we approve this variance, we would be decimating our LED sign bylaws and guidelines and wasting a lot of our ferry fare money. It's not a minor variance. This request should be given a great deal of thought. After all, this is also about precedent and the future installation of very large LEDs throughout our neighborhoods in Nanaimo. And how about the Gabriola Ferry Terminal downtown? Is that next? So why are these signs so important to BC Ferries that they'd ask us to ignore our bylaws and guidelines? In their request for variance, they state that these giant LED TVs are needed to communicate important operational messages to drivers. The communication mentioned by BC Ferries in the few meetings that we've had with them as the Brecken community were that they wanted to communicate to us, the drivers, that the ferry is late, just in case you hadn't noticed. Also, you should shut off your propane, just in case you hadn't seen it on the message on your ticket or heard it over the speakers. Also, the ferry's loading, just in case you're out of your vehicle and the giant TV can tell you to get back in. They may have to announce on the loudspeaker that you should look at the sign so that you know to get back in your car, though. Another part of the communication mentioned in our few meetings were that the need to run commercials for BC Ferries vacations, just in case you're planning a trip on the ferry. Also, they want to run advertisements for Big O Burgers, just in case you didn't know there's a cafeteria aboard the ferry. In addition to communicating with us, the other stated reason for the signs in their original application was, and this is a quote, in order to communicate information to vehicles waiting to board BC Ferries, the applicant plans to construct 2 LED signs, which has now become 3, within the BC Ferry boarding area. The applicant intends to replace the current loudspeaker system with the proposed signage. Note, they said they would replace the loudspeaker system, and that would be nice since nobody can understand what the hell they're saying anyway. However, a recent letter from BC Ferries to Brecken residents states, the purpose of these signs is to increase the availability of operational information to customers waiting in the terminal compound. One prime advantage would be that BC Ferries could reduce, notice they say could, reduce the reliance on public address announcements. In their current application, BC Ferries says the LEDs are needed in order to communicate information to vehicles waiting to board BC Ferry. This will provide safety and vehicle loading information to the traveling public that is critical to the operation of the facility. This information is presently communicated by voice over loudspeaker with limited practical effect and with noise spill implications for the surrounding community. It seems that BC Ferries is not quite sure why they're requesting this variance. But now they're admitting that they've been operating unsafely for 40-plus years with their outdated PA system. Remember, BC Ferries is asking us, through our council, to allow them to install very, very large TVs in our Brechin neighborhood. You would think at least BC Ferries would know why, or at least be honest about why they want these giant TVs installed. Don't you think so? Maybe they're being lured by the possibility of future profits from third-party advertising. If this variance is passed, just wait for a future request allowing them to run beer commercials. Now, just to reconfirm why the Brechin Hill community opposes this, billboard-sized TVs in our neighborhood, remember they're requesting 3 giant TVs that are double the allowable size when only one small one would be allowed under current bylaws. The first is traffic safety. And number 4 of our sign guidelines in Nanaimo state, no LED or animated sign shall be permitted unless it can be demonstrated not to be a nuisance that distracts or impairs safe vehicle operation. With this in mind, note that the most southerly, very large LED sign is in direct line of sight with the very large and busy Stewart-Brechin intersection. Drivers heading north to the ferry or turning onto Brechin or Zorkin will be distracted by a gigantic TV screen in the parking lot in front of them. Giant LED TVs will be creating additional traffic hazard in the neighborhood already suffering from ferry traffic inappropriately feeding off Stewart and Brechin into our neighborhood side streets. The second issue is conflict with a residential neighborhood. That's guideline number 9, which says an application should provide evidence to demonstrate no conflict will occur with adjacent residential development. There will be negative impact on the neighborhood inflicted on us by these gigantic TVs, blocked views, increased light pollution, and the reduction of property values and saleability. The pictures provided by BC Ferries to Council's agenda do not accurately show the impact of these signs in our neighborhood. And it's not just the front row of houses, it's a very wide group of houses within our neighborhood. I'm sure if you've ever taken a picture of a deer or a boat and then looked at it later, you see this little dot that you thought was you could see clearly by eye, and it really doesn't represent clearly. And this is what we're seeing in these pictures by BC Ferries. These are very large signs. They're right in front of our houses, and they're also going to be spreading light to many others. When we bought our houses in Brechin, we were not expecting an all-night light show from the massive parking lot lights and the Starbucks signs that BC Ferries do not seem to be able to shut off at night. That would definitely save them and us some money if they would shut them off. And now they want to inflict additional light on us from giant TVs showing commercials to hapless drivers who won't even have a PVR to fast forward past them. After this proposal was rejected last year, we asked BC Ferries to come up with an improved communication plan. And their consultation this year regarding the giant TVs consisted of a meeting called on a Thursday before the Labor Day long weekend to be held on a Tuesday after the Labor Day long weekend at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, if I was cynical, I'd think they were trying to restrict the number of residents who could attend the meeting by the short notice and holding the meeting on a workday. In our effort to be good neighbors, we've recommended that BC Ferries could find other means to enhance its communications challenges and save money without installing giant TVs in our neighborhood. Daily, we listen to a totally inadequate BC Ferries public address system at Departure Bay. A modern PA system that's clearly audible could be installed, which would allow BC Ferries to direct people to look for ferry updates and information on their tablets or smartphones using the free BC Ferry Wi-Fi. Another positive step would be to install many more LED TVs in the terminal and on board ships where there's a captive audience and where currently there are very few TVs available for viewing. These simple measures would be more effective and cost much less than the $300,000 price tag attached to giant TVs. As good neighbors, we'd also like to save BC Ferries from making another series of poor business decisions. At a time of restraint, service cuts, and raising fares, BC Ferries wants to spend this $300,000 here, another $300,000 in Horseshoe Bay, and who knows, maybe Gabriola as well.
Okay, Mr. Lyons, if you could just wind it up, we're getting over time.
I'm getting there. As a fifth-generation Islander, I'm upset that we're being misled once again about ferry costs and benefits. I just think about the disastrous BC Ferry decisions in the past, such as construction of fast ferries, raised ferry rates that have cost the economy billions, schedule cuts, loss of seniors discounts, and the worst, in my view, the German-built Coastal Inspiration sitting at Departure Bay Dock most of the winter because it's less efficient to run than our 40-year-old BC-built ferries. So we, the 177 neighbors who signed a petition, are asking the Mayor and Council to reject BC Ferries' request for variance DVP 217 because it's not in the interest of our neighborhood or the rest of Nanaimo, now or in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, the next, I see no questions. Thank you. The next delegation is Mr. Jason Bowman, Executive Director, Operations Strategies at BC Ferries. Welcome.
Jason Bowman, 680 Trans-Canada Highway. And I'm here to represent BC Ferries, obviously, and give a bit more information on our development variance permit for Departure Bay Ferry Terminal. What it is, to put in context, that we're talking about tonight is 3 LED screens. We've put an image in front of you here so you can see what the view would look like with these screens that face inwards towards the terminal. And I'd just like to talk a bit about why LED signs. The signs, the purpose for them is to enhance our effective communication with our customers from both a safety and an operational customer service information perspective. We do 3 times a year customer satisfaction tracking, and the one area that we consistently rate very poor is on the clarity of our PA systems. We've had PA system experts come into each of our major terminals and help us enhance those, and yet our customer satisfaction, the clarity of the PA systems, it doesn't seem to be effective. Our PA system as well, we don't have an ability to use it during the the early morning hours for the 6:30 a.m. departure. We don't use it, nor do we use it for the 9 p.m. departure if there's a sailing delay or a cancellation. The other thing that the signs would provide us to do is public safety messaging, such as Amber Alerts. Industry research is the other reason. These types of signs work, and I'll show you some statistics in a few minutes from our Departure Bay installation. But what we use with these signs is we use more pictograms, and we try and rely on pictograms for important messaging, such as when the ferry's full, to have customers park within 24 inches of the car in front of them so that we can get more vehicles on the ferry, turning off propane, no smoking signs and such. So we find pictographs are very effective for communicating with customers who may not have English as their first language. Also, today, as I'm using a visual presentation as well as an audio, my voice presentation, it's just a more effective means of communicating, and that's one of the other reasons that we'd like to combine both our current audio with this LED screen visual presentation. And the third emerging issue is promotion of BC Ferry ancillary services. Our food and catering retail operations on board are generating in the neighborhood of $80 million annually in revenue. And this revenue is becoming very important to help us ease the pressure at the fare box. So, yeah, we would like to see that $80 million annually come up a couple percent, and if we can do it this way, by promoting those services, then that's positive. So Duke Point. So approximately 3 years ago, I was here in front of you to seek a variance permit for our Duke Point Ferry Terminal. And in June of 2012, that system went operational. And shortly after it went operational, we had a third party come in and do some surveying for us. And 89% of the customers that we survey found the visual display of announcements as important. 90% of our customers found the content useful and informative. And 93% of them thought that this would be a good idea at our other major terminals. So that's the survey that we did post-installation at Duke Point. The other reason why we did that installation at Duke Point was just for that reason about our neighbors, is we wanted to install a location where there was no neighbors and then bring our neighbors over to that location to help us to get some feedback for the Departure Bay installation, and that's exactly what we did. We took our Brecon Hill a couple representatives from our Brecon Hill Residents Association over to Duke Point, and when I was last in front of you a year ago, What we thought, and what we had heard from them that was important was light spray. And we did modeling that we presented to you last time, and that was our main intent, was to shield the neighborhood homes from light spray. When we were last in front of you, we were asked to go have an open house, which we did. We've had an open house. We've gone door to door on a couple of occasions, as well as created an email. So if people weren't home, we left an email address for people to respond. And what we heard was concerns about view corridors. And so our current proposal, we believe, addresses that concern. We've reduced the sign height. So from the top of the sign, it's a 9-meter height. The signs have been reduced by 30% in size, so from 30 square meters down to 20 square meters. And just due to the nature of the lot, the size of the lot, we've had to add a third sign in order to make sure that our customers can see the sign because we reduced the height and size. So this is an example picture for you currently. So the top picture shows what our previous proposal was before we had our open houses. We had our open house, and on the bottom picture shows what a representative sample is. So you can see that the view that is being taken away is of the terminal rather than what we heard was important before, which was the surrounding nature areas. And to give a bit of a representation from a customer point of view, we've on the bottom left-hand side, you can see a picture with, we were told, well, will people see these signs if you have a truck parked beside you and in front of you? So we've done quite extensive modeling to make sure that these signs will be effective, and we hope that you'd see that from this picture here. So in summary, we're seeking a request for one of the 10 guidelines, and it's the requirement for size and number of signs, and we're asking for this exemption because of the nature of the lot. And we hope that you'll be supportive in our desire to more effectively communicate to our customers and address their needs. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Bowman. I see no questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, you do. Okay. Mr. Bowman, sorry.
Could you go back to that slide of the parking lot where you had current, one more? Now, when I look at that, other than seeing an obstruction on the top one of a part of Newcastle Channel, there's really nothing that has changed. The light that will emanate from the top one or the bottom one, from a neighborhood point of view, I would submit to you is going to be exactly the same. And I'd like your reaction to that, because I really don't see the difference. If someone lives a little bit higher up and was confronted with the top proposal, they would not have had the opportunity to complain about losing, say, a portion of Newcastle Channel, because the topography behind Beach is of such a nature that this does not make any difference to those people. I can see that.
Your Worship, the gray object in the pictures here represents the back side of the signs.
I see that.
And there's actually a baffle along the side as well that's on the side closest to us, so that none of the front side of the screen is visible from the surrounding neighbors. And just to clarify, it's the bottom picture is our revised proposal, where you can see that the top of the sign is not the view. It's not obstructing any of the view above our terminal building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sir, Councillor Kipp.
Thank you very much. Safety announcements. It's safer for someone to look over at a TV screen while they're driving their car onto the ferry than hearing an announcement, or they. I didn't mean that to happen. I didn't expect that, but it is a visual distraction when you're driving. I mean, you don't want people looking at their text when they're driving on the ferry or doing anything. So could you answer that? And I have one follow-up question on that. You can ask that.
Yeah, Your Worship, the screens go through a cycle of announcements. So ideally, when a customer is in the lot for 10 or 20 or 30 minutes prior to boarding, they've seen the whole cycle. So there wouldn't be any new information ideally displayed when customers are driving aboard. It goes through a cycle, and so people would presumably have seen those messages. And I must stress the importance of the safety messaging. No smoking on a vehicle car deck is not a trivial matter. We've had fuel spills, vehicles coming off ferries with fuel spills, and those messages are important. Customers not using cell phones as they drive on board is extremely important for our staff safety.
Okay, and a follow-up. Have you looked at private radio frequency to give messaging to the individual cars in the parking lot and done anything like that?
Yes, Your Worship. So the question around radio frequencies, we have experimented with that at some of the other terminals many years ago, almost a decade ago, and we found it just was not effective to get people to tune to a specific frequency. Again, they're in the terminal for a period of time, and everybody has their preferences of what they would like to listen to.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councillor Johnson, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was interested in your remark about the PA system experts, that they can't improve the sound. It seems it's very difficult for me to fathom that in this day and age, when we can go to an outdoor football game or a baseball game and the sound systems are impeccable. I'm having difficulty understanding why that would be the case.
Yes, so the difficulty we have, is we don't have the ability to pump up the volume that you may experience when you're around a stadium. We have to keep the volume level at a certain threshold. It's a fine balance because we don't want our neighbors hearing excessively loud announcements. We do get complaints from time to time about the volume of our announcements, and therefore we have to turn them down. If you take also into consideration our weather, so a lot of the time of the year where it's raining and customers have their windows up. When I was traveling on the ferry most recently, that was the case. It was raining out. I had my windows up. And it was hard to hear the announcements at the volume level that we can have them. Some of the work that we've done to try and improve the PA system is everybody speaks with a different volume. So we've actually had regulators on our microphones as well as regulators on the speakers so that we always have the sound going out at a consistent decibel level. We've also put more speakers in throughout the terminal and at a lower level, trying to bring them down to the customer's height. So we have made some investments and trials in that.
Follow up, Your Worship. Have you ever considered having your staff or BC Ferries staff at the ticket outlets, ticket windows, when they print the ticket, just to have the safety warnings printed on the back of the ticket? I know we all look at the cost of the ticket, the ferry costs as they're rising, how much it's costing us to go, and certainly 3 or 4 key points on a printed ticket might serve the need.
Yes, we do campaigns from time to time of safety messages, but I can tell you by and large what we do hear back from our customers is about paper and paper being wasted, and we have issues where somebody will get that safety bulletin in Nanaimo at Departure Bay as an example, and then when they're coming back from Horseshoe Bay, they don't welcome receiving them. They concern about the environment. But
we all receive a ticket, though. So,
yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Just a couple of questions. What percentage of your passengers from Departure Bay are walk-on?
I would not have that information on me today. I apologize.
But reasonable to assume that those passengers wouldn't be impacted by the presence of these signs or not?
Walk-on passengers would not see these unless the children in the play area, for example. This strategy, I would say, though, it is in concert. We do have indoor screens throughout the terminal already existing, as well as on board our ships.
And I don't think anybody's in objection to the indoor screens for those purposes. I think that your walk-ons have increased considerably. My next question, what percentage of your drive-on traffic are first-timers?
Again, I apologize. I wouldn't have that information. I'd have to get that for us.
Thank you. Because it would make sense to me that second and third and fourth timers going on a ferry would know, for the most part, what they need to know about being in their car, when to be in their car, what ferry it was that they were trying to catch. When the gal tells you or the guy that you may not make this one, the next one is at 2:40. That the people that are driving are adults, and I would like to think that they're responsible, ideally, to get into their car and not need a TV screen to inform them of when they should be doing that. So we're talking about adding 2 from 1. The one screen, if you had one, where would it go? Because surely one screen, one LED sign would satisfy a certain number of cars parked in the departure bay terminal. Do we know how many cars that one sign would satisfactorily provide the information that you're trying to give out?
Okay, so first, can I respond to the comment
Sure.
about information for regular customers and usefulness? Is that we're showing current conditions, and current conditions are always changing. So what time the vessel's coming in, the percentage full. A lot of our customers are still traveling on a show and go basis, so that information is useful to them, as well as.
But not that the ferry's going to leave early.
But if it's leaving late, that's important information for us to try and convey.
Oh, okay.
But to the question about one sign, if we had a solution that one sign would fit at the terminal, that's the proposal that we would be going for. It's the nature of this lot with the way that we configure it, we keep commercial traffic in a certain area. If we put the one sign up against the ramp, for example, we would only be able to communicate to the commercial vehicle customers, and we would miss all of the underheight customers that are off to the left-hand side as you're looking out at the water. Conversely, if we put a sign, because that section of the lot is a bit further back, if we put the sign there for those customers, unfortunately the commercial customers would lose out. And that was our initial intent, was just to have the 2 signs. But again, based on the feedback about trying to limit the degradation of view corridors, we came up with this more recent proposal based on the feedback from the community about having more but smaller signs. And so that's where we came up with the recommendation.
Please listen.
Thank you. Thanks.
The delegations are here so we can hear them. If you disagree, I understand that, but please don't disrupt the meetings. Councillor Kipp.
Just a thing on the promotion, the ancillary promotion. There's been concerns, of course, third-party advertising. I hope, can you explain, do you have any plans or what do you plan? And one thing with the holidays, just on a personal note, I know you advertise holidays on Vancouver Island to Parksville, and yet we have 3 ferry terminals, and you advertise Parksville doesn't have a ferry terminal. They must have paid you some money for that, I guess. I'm only kidding. Okay. It bothers me that Parksville gets a BC Ferries, come enjoy BC Ferry holidays. They don't have a ferry terminal. We have 3, and you don't mention us. But that's just a personal tourism thing. What about the promotion, third party, and the chase for revenue, and the need for money, and eventually, how do we stop that? How do we know that you would stop that? Not that I'm in favor of these TVs, but I want to know your answer on that.
You have LED guidelines in place, and I believe the 10th and final item on there is third-party advertising is not allowed. And BC Ferries currently has no intention to use these signs for third-party advertising. And if something changed down the road and we wanted to do that, then we would be back here in front of you seeking that as another variance.
Thank you.
And I would just clarify that BC Ferries Vacations is potentially what you saw. And yeah, we're trying to generate more travel on BC Ferries through our BC Ferry Vacations, and it helps the bottom line. And it's like I said, about $80 million worth of revenue between that and our retail and catering.
Okay. Others said reduced rates would bring up the ridership too. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bowman. I see no further questions at this point. Thank you for your time. Now, the next delegation is Mr. Doug Hamming, and Mr. Hamming, Stantec Architecture on behalf of BC Ferries. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. There's a series of slides that go with my presentation. Okay. Cue those up. Or am I queuing them up? Am I going forward and back with this? Or? Okay. BC Ferries asked me some time ago to assist them in the visual representation of what this project would look like. As you're aware, the tourist industry is a competitive one, and if you can increase guest experience so that it's positive, that is good for tourism in your region. Secondly, 93% of their clients that have been exposed to this system of communication have suggested that it was positive and that it should be put in elsewhere. And on the basis of that, I was asked to help illustrate this. So the proposed locations for the signs are as indicated above, and they're in the package that you had. We have and on those locations, we've indicated 3 viewpoints from which we've used our modeling system to illustrate where they are. So what we've done is we've actually built a computer model of the ferry terminal that has topographic parameters, and it includes the housing on the bluff as well. And using that information, we were able to go into each of those locations with a camera and superimpose exactly what these units will look like from exactly those locations. As discussed by Jason, the former proposal was for larger signs. That's a sign on the right. The present option is for option A. The sign's 30% less in area and 30% less in height on the left. A view of those 3 signs from near the entrance is here. I've had to outline them in red because otherwise, in order for you to see them, there's a top left, center, that shows an additional 2, and there's one way off in the distance on the ramp. So from within the terminal, this is what it looks like if you've ever had your kids playing in that play area. You can see the one mounted to the ramp and then the other mounted back toward the administration building. This is the one that is nearest the entrance, taken again from the dot on the map on the upper left. This is the second. The top one is the option proposed at the moment. The bottom is from the one that was proposed previously, which is 30% larger. Again, these are all inward facing to the terminal. Then we went up on the hill, and I want to show you the worst, let's say, case first. The top is what we're proposing now. The bottom is what was proposed previously. The sign itself is contained completely within the ferry area. It does not block any of the water view, and that is the back of the sign. There is no light spillage from that, and that is from 660 Beach. Next is from 646 Beach, house on the end. You can see sign A on the left, which is what we're proposing, sign B on the right, and then on the lower side, there's a rectangle showing where the sign is because it doesn't show it all beyond the tree. From 654 Beach, again, that's the edge of the sign, no light spillage into this at all. That's the sign that, for all intents and purposes, is axially located to the dwelling. This is 628 Beach. Sign A on the left is what we're proposing. Sign B is the slightly taller one, which we are no longer proposing. And on the bottom, sign view E, sign A, the back side of the sign, no light spillage. Again, similarly for 670 at Beach. Am I at 670? Sorry, 670 Beach. That is the sign at the top that we're proposing now. The one that we were proposing previously is taller. And again, that is the back side of the sign, no light spillage. 690 Beach. This is from the far left dwelling on our map. This is the sign that is most obvious to that dwelling. Again, the back sign of that sign. The top is what we're proposing. The lower is what we're no longer proposing. No light spillage onto that dwelling. This is the sign that is mounted. This is an image of the sign mounted on the ramp itself. That's a view from 637 Beckton Avenue, and the sign is concealed behind a tree. We are at 660 Dan Lyons Place. Again, the same sign. This is what we're proposing at the top. Sign B is what we were proposing previously. And then this is from the terminal itself, looking at the sign on the ramp, and that's what it looks like from the intersection. And my apologies, the signs are extremely difficult to see because they are not readily visible. That's the end of my presentation.
Okay, I see no questions. Well, wait, Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Could you just go back a couple of slides to the sign that's on the ramp, please?
That one.
That one. So that sign to me seems to be part of the bridge, if you will, and it suggests to me when you say that you need the second and third sign, which would be for the middle of the parking lot and the back of the parking lot, so to speak. Would that be a reasonable assumption?
If you look at the layout of the parking lot, well, actually the top right, it's a long parking lot, obviously, and this view that you're seeing this from is from very near the front of the lot. Yes.
So it's the bottom photo that you're proposing.
We are proposing the top photo. That is the smaller sign that we are now proposing.
So if I may, if you'll indulge me, Your Worship. So if it was the bottom one, which is the larger sign, then that's going to project to further back into the parking lot.
Does project further back. The effective viewing of that sign does not reach more than 25-30% of the lot. So that's why we're proposing that we have the additional signs, because when you're way back in the lot, you can see from this drawing, the bulk of the vehicles that need to know when to proceed, the various issues that Jason's identified, in the interest of customer information, they can't see it from there.
Thank you.
Mr. Eming, can I just ask you a question? You've heard the first delegation, Mr. Lyons, come and speak to us, and he talked about the amount of light that will be seen on the properties.
Yes, in fact, he described it as LED blight.
Sorry?
He described it as LED blight.
Well, I'm not going to play with words. The question to you, sir, is he discussed the amount of light that's coming up the hill. I don't care what it's coming from. If you want to be facetious, you're not going to get much mileage here. I'm just trying to ask you a very simple question. In your opinion, the amount of light that is being emitted and impacts the people uphill from that, is that valid in your opinion?
In my opinion, with all due respect, it is not.
Okay, well, I guess where my concern comes in is that, the delegation has come, and I think he made a very comprehensive explanation of the concerns. And one of the things that I have to feel is that you haven't done a reasonable job in notifying these people. Now, I realize you're a consultant, and it's BC Ferries that are making the decisions, so I'm not singling you out. I'm just referring to the issue that I think a better consultation should have taken place with the neighborhood, because obviously they're still not satisfied. And I'm very uncomfortable myself with where we are today on it, and frankly, I would be inclined to support a recommendation from council that would be referred back to staff to see what further concessions could be made, because I think as it stands now, I'm going to have trouble supporting it. Oh, Councillor Besser, you're off, sorry. Anyway, but that said, if there's anyone else... Okay, a second. All those in favor? Opposed? Are you trying to flag down a bus, sir? Or are you? No. Well, we can't do that.
Your Worship.
Yeah.
Your Worship. So
there
there's
will be a point after this where other speakers can be heard.
That's correct. So you're going to now request that anyone wishes to speak about this issue? Yeah.
There's a correspondence from Mr. Michael Harrison too.
That's correct.
We'll acknowledge that as well. And then we're going to, unless there's any other questions from council, to the point where it's requested that Councillor Hirion wishing to speak to that DVP. So over you go, sir. Not from there, but from the microphone. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Your Worship and esteemed council. My name is Alistair King. I came here today not to complain about the interrupted views or the land values along Beach Drive, or the rationale that BC Ferries has come up with when I pressed for a reason why they actually need the signs. I came here today as a recreational boater, amateur astronomer, and a wildlife conservationist. I'm just going to read this brief statement here. Article 4 of the City of Nanaimo operational requirements for LED and animated signs states that there's no LED animated signs shall be permitted unless it can be demonstrated not to be a nuisance that distracts or impairs safe vehicle operation. And I contend that despite whatever you decide about the impact on the roadway or the highway, these signs will have a direct and negative impact on the Newcastle Channel, which is a place I boat from, right from Brecon Beach there, or Brecon Point, sorry. It's an extremely busy boating area. There's float planes, there's yachts, there's small fishermen like myself that come in and out at all times of the day and night. And I feel that it's a dangerous place to boat at the best of times when people are not being distracted by these very bright LED signs. And if any of you have ever had the opportunity to be on the water beyond Duke Point, the sign that they have there is extremely bright, and you can see it from miles away. And speaking of lighting up the sky, my friends often hear me complaining about my backyard and the fact that I can't use my big fancy telescope. The light that's emitted from the parking lot is unbelievable. And this isn't my strongest argument, so I'll just fast forward here. I still think that Nanaimo should consider a darkening of the night sky. I think it's a great policy, helps astronomers, saves power consumption and the like. We can talk about that later. My most important point, though, regards the wildlife living on Newcastle Island. As you may be aware, Newcastle Island is home to a number of species of birds and waterfowl, including the purple martin, cormorants, woodpeckers, of course, bald eagles as well. These birds are particularly susceptible to light pollution and are nocturnal animals. And the scientific evidence on this topic is incontrovertible. I brought an article from National Geographic that highlights the fact that birds, when they're flying at night in particular, migrating and whatnot, do fly into these signs. So I'm going to suggest to council, with the utmost respect, that if you have any doubts about these LED signs and the impact they'll have on Newcastle Island, which is of course a provincial park, or the wildlife that's on there, or the fact that they may actually be contravening council's own 1995 Newcastle Island Master Plan, then you must say no to these wasteful LED signs. Yeah.
Okay, sir. I see no questions. Thank you. Now, is there anyone else in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to... Can I help you with something?
No, just motioning to you.
Oh, please come down.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. My name is Michael Harrison. I'm the chairman of the Brecon Hill Community Association. One thing I want to clarify is the LED glare spray, and specifically from the newest edition, which is the third, I believe they call it Sign A, which is the southernmost one that looks over the ticket booth area. That area, if you look at the spray, and you saw some of these things, that spray, LED spray, will reach from about 8 houses up Brecon from Stewart, along Stewart, across Stones Marina, and the cement plant and Pimbry Point, the Esso area. These areas, both the cement plant, Pimbry Point, and Stones Marina, when we did our neighborhood plan a number of years ago, these were all identified as prime residential areas. Can you imagine Mark Stones is here, and he'd probably like to speak to you about the potential for reducing any potential for building any kind of a residential in that area with two, not just one, but two large LED signs with large LED glare on the sides of those buildings. And as we also put in our letter here to you, can you imagine if they did something like this downtown at the Gabriola ferry terminal against Cameron Island? It'd be totally unacceptable. So that's what I wanted to clarify. One other thing I wanted to clarify, it came up in discussion about the use of these LED signs and the messaging on that. If you go to Duke Point, more than 60% of the content is commercial advertising. It's not traffic notices, it's commercial advertising. And we asked ferries about this and about, it's been discussed, third-party advertising. The answer we got was, it's not being discussed at this time. Perhaps tomorrow, but not this time. That's all I have to say.
Okay, sir, the question is to staff or the delegation? Councillor Anderson, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my question's through to staff. With this sign, if it was approved, is it going to be on 24 hours a day or?
Ms. Lindsay?
Sorry, Your Worship, BC Ferries has indicated they would comply with the other terms of the LED guidelines, which includes that the light or the sign be turned off during non-business hours.
So from 9 o'clock on, the sign would be off, and then it
That's not what we've been told. We've been told it would be on until the last ferry comes in at night.
Could we get some clarity on that, please?
Yes, Your Worship. The sign would be turned off after the last departure, so 2100 in the winter, 2130 in the summertime, and would be operational when the terminal opens up, which is approximately 0500.
Okay, thank you.
So
go ahead.
So just to clarify, it would be off at 9:30 at the latest, is correct?
Yes, in the evening it would be shut down at 21:30 or 9:30 in our summer schedule, and in the winter when the ferry last departure is a bit earlier, we'd shut it down at 9 p.m. or 2100 in the winter.
Okay, thank you.
One other additional thing I'd like to clarify. When we had our meeting with them about 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago, we had said only 5 people could attend because it was at 1 o'clock on a business day. So we discussed, and they said and agreed they would have another public meeting before this proposal came to council. This hasn't happened.
Okay, sir. I see no further questions. Thank you very much. Now, is there anyone else in attendance? Welcome.
Thank you. Nancy Mitchell. I live at 225 Cypress. And the reason I'm here is because I live in Newcastle. And Newcastle and Brecon both completed this official plan together back in 2008. So as a resident of Newcastle, I'm quite interested to make sure that this official neighborhood plan actually gets implemented and gets adhered to. And if you go through this official plan, or neighborhood plan, and I haven't really seen any reference to it in staff's reports or any discussion around this table, we seem to be talking about the size and the number of signs as opposed to the basic question of whether there should be a signs or no signs. And I think it's pretty clear from the neighborhood plan that LED signs are not intended for our neighborhood, regardless of the size and regardless of the number. If you look at the BC Ferries property itself, in the neighborhood plan, it's designated as medium low density waterfront. It's not designated for industrial. It's not like Duke Point. This is a residential area and a residential component of a residential neighborhood. And as Micah suggested, it's also surrounded by even higher density residential at potential for the cement plant, for the areas around Mark Stone's marina. And all of those places that are adjacent to the BC Ferries are intended to be residential and are intended to satisfy a lot of the density requirements that you've been talking about at this council for the last 2 hours. in terms of trying to make this a 22nd century city. And this is part of Newcastle and Brechin is a big part of that plan to increase the density. So number one, this is a residential neighborhood. It's not an industrial neighborhood. Number two, we've got a lot of environmental protection policies in our neighborhood plan. We talk about sustainable neighborhoods. We talk about walkable neighborhoods. We talk about protecting green spaces. These signs are environmental pollution. They're not sustainable. They're nothing to do with our neighborhood plan whatsoever. And in fact, on page 36 of our neighborhood plan, it says specifically that the city and BC Ferries is work together to ensure operational impacts on the environment and neighborhood residents are minimized, not maximized. And I think what we have here is a situation of maximization of environmental impacts on residential neighborhoods, not a minimization. The third thing in our neighborhood plan, on page 76, it calls for public art. It calls for creating gateways in the city of Nanaimo, at Brechin and Stewart, so that when people come off of the ferries, they're welcomed into this community in a way that they feel that they're part of it and they understand us and they want to spend some time here and provide some economic life to this community. The plan does not call for advertising LED signs. It calls for our public art and gateways. And it doesn't call for this kind of signs for BC Ferry to use for people leaving the island. What it calls for is people coming onto the island and saying what a great place we are to live here. And the fourth point about the Nanaimo or Newcastle Brechin neighborhood plan is that under the implementation plan, and there is an implementation plan, some of them are short-term measures, and we're already a year past the short-term implementation term for our plan. One of those measures was to work with BC Ferries to evaluate the road design of Brechin and Stewart. That's never been done. We passed this plan in 2008, and the short-term requirements are 5 years. We're 2 years past, or year past already, the due date for that kind of requirement to be implemented in this plan. And instead of talking about fixing up Brechin and Stewart and making it more amenable to the community, we're spending our time here talking about large LED signs that don't even fit the guidelines. So my bottom line to you, and just one further point, this is what's on the website of the company that actually makes the signs. This is the kind of pollution that you're going to see. This is taken from Duke Point. This is a compilation of all the signs there are out there. I don't see one advisory on safety on any of those sign pictures. They're all pictures of mountains, travel, looks like some marimba dancing in Mexico. This is what is on the website of the company who actually installs the BC Ferry signs. So my point to you is very briefly is just say no. Just say no altogether. The variances that are being asked for are extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. We spent a lot of time in this community talking about LED signs. We set some guidelines. These variances are over the top. Secondly, there's a conflict with the residential area, and that's part of the guidelines, that there shouldn't be a conflict with the residential area. And thirdly, these signs just do not fit with the Newcastle and Brechin neighborhood plan. This comes first. Thank you.
I see no questions. Thank you. Now, is there anyone else who'd like to speak to that matter?
My name is Fred Taylor, and watching this episode tonight, there's always been, even by BC Ferries, showing you a picture with a house and a sign in front of it. If you go to page 182 and 184 and 185, you'll see in red the three signs showing up. And houses, you might say, to the west of those signs. And it appears what you've seen tonight is a sign in front of a house. What about the panoramic view of a house, one of those houses looking at three signs? They're going to look like corridors of view through those three signs. which is what they're failing. They're just showing you dealing with one sign directly in front of a house. But these diagrams, and if you look at them, and they'll show you red as a house, and what they've shown you is one sign, but that red house looking, say, to the north has got a problem of looking at all three signs, and a problem of corridor to see past them. Just like if you stack all our waterfront with high-rises and take the view away from the public.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stone, where are you? Oh, come on. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Worship Council. My name is Mark Stone, 1690 Stewart Avenue. I'm the person that's been referred to, that owns Stones Marina, which is just south of the BC Ferry Terminal. Late in the day today, I emailed to each and every one of you in the city a letter. It's funny that I haven't been involved in this process at all from the beginning, but what I did is I tried to describe that situation in this letter, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to read that.
Please.
Okay. We met today with an executive member of the Brecken Hill Community Association on the subject of electronic signage proposed for the BC Ferry Terminal at Departure Bay. We look forward to working with the Brecken Hill Community Association as our community partner in the planning of the redevelopment of our property. The Brecken Hill Association today conveyed their concern as to the relationship of the proposed signage may have to the quality of life for future residents at our site. Now, our property is included in the Newcastle Brecken Neighbourhood Plan, adopted to our official community plan bylaw 2008, number 6500, on May 16, 2011. Our property was rezoned to permit mixed-use multifamily residential development pursuant to our zoning bylaw 4500. Our architects have been working within OCP and zoning guidelines on a site plan for our property that locates residential housing in visual proximity to the terminal. In fact, many of the condos look directly into the parking area or the holding area for the ferries, so I guess we'd be looking straight at the signs. It appears we were not included in BC Ferry's information campaign for the proposed signage. We understand and appreciate from reading the staff recommendation and report to Council that much effort has been made by BC Ferries to address concerns expressed by residents in Brecken Hill. Until tonight, I didn't know to what extent they had gone. Notwithstanding this, we would very much like to be invited to a community meeting hosted by BC Ferries before Council puts staff recommendation to a vote. So we'd ask that this be referred back to staff. This would give us, our architects and Brecken residents, the opportunity to discuss impacts, if any, such signs may have on our plans, and to discuss ways we can work with BC Ferries to address those impacts. We believe that the quality of life in a residential area is influenced by many social, environmental, and physical factors. In our opinion, the proposed signage should be considered one of those factors. Accordingly, we do look forward to having the opportunity to meet with our community and with BC Ferries on this.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. I see no questions for you, and I appreciate the time. Now, is there anyone else who'd like to speak to matters regarding DVP 217? Nobody else in attendance? For the second time, anyone else would like to speak to matters related to DVP 217? And for the third and final time, anyone like to speak to DVP 217? Okay, it's going to be now up to Council, and I think I've earlier suggested that I am very uncomfortable with this proposal tonight. I'm not going to be able to support it in its present form. And I'd like to suggest that Council present a motion to refer back to staff to have this looked at with a possible view of reducing the amount of signage requested. And I'll leave that at whoever the mover wishes to be. No? No one else? Okay. So then we'll just, I'm just trying to give a note because, I mean, some kind of concession must be available here. But in any event, let's just call Councillor Greaves. Do you want to?
Well, was this staff recommendation, was this, has someone moved it yet? No.
No.
Well, I just wanted to move it to get it on the floor.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded, okay. Discussion, do you want to get into it now?
May I speak
Sure.
in?
Yes, absolutely.
First of all, I've received a petition, like all of you have, and I think my mother's name was on it. She lives in Ontario. What I'm saying is there was a lot of people that lived in a lot of different areas that I don't think had anything to do with this. But then petitions always are very unusual. But anyway, the ferries, the BC Ferries have done everything they've could possibly do to make this thing work. Unfortunately, it really is not appropriate in this area. It's a residential area. You can see by the number of people here, and the residents have basically spoken. They don't want change. They don't want this development variance permit to go through, and I won't be supporting it.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, number one, this whole LED sign bylaw is got to be the craziest thing I've ever seen or even contemplated, that you would prohibit something, but if you go through this process, you can apply for a development variance permit. Here's the 10 guidelines to approve one. That's just crazy, and it's crazy for the company to have to face that. It's crazy for the neighbors to have to face that. But in any case, that's my own personal opinion. As far as the neighborhood is concerned, I did attend the meeting. I did hear what they had to say. One of the things that further information's come forward, and I'll tell you, they've tried really hard to try to work with BC Ferries on a number of issues, and to no avail. One of the residents said something that really struck home to me. It's always daylight in my house. We've asked them to turn those lights off at night. They've refused. There's squealing tires in the middle of the night. There's machines roaring around. There's people using the PA system at 2 o'clock in the morning. And all of those things tend to go unnoticed, or they just don't care.
Okay, we
So
really need to focus on the LED signs, though.
Yes. This
tires
is
I hate too, but anyway.
Mr. Chair, this is the final nail for the neighbors in my mind.
Okay.
And I can't support it.
Okay. Councillor Brennan.
I don't support this either. I think the neighborhood over the years has been patient and cooperative with BC Ferries. Even though there's a high impact on their lives on a daily basis, there's noise, there's the traffic that goes up the two roads, there's long weekends, there's parking issues, and they have been patient and they have cooperated with BC Ferries, because I can recall when they were changing the parking lot configuration there. Very patient, very cooperative neighborhood. But they don't want this. They don't want this. I don't blame them. And so, as Ms. Mitchell said, it's not consistent with the neighborhood plan. And as the other fellow said, the impact on Newcastle has to also be taken into account. And given all those things, I just can't support this.
Okay. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship.
Questions been called?
Well, you know, the thing that I don't understand is that I'm really having a tough time discerning between the first time that BC Ferries came and the second one this time. there's little or no difference that I can discern. So that's problematic. I want to thank Mrs. Mitchell for again reminding us of the Brecon and Newcastle neighbourhood plan that I had probably should have paid more attention to in the last week, but I didn't. So it's good to be reminded of that. And you know, like Councillor McKay, even though it's not part of the LED sign, the complaints that have come out of that BC Ferry lot with other things that still are not fixed either, and noise is one of them, you know, doesn't make me any more sympathetic than they might want me to be. On top of that, and the thing that really did it to me was the letter that came from the Horseshoe Bay business folks, who, you know, themselves are urging us not to do this because they don't want to be the next victim. And, you know, what I haven't heard from BC Ferries is the distinct difference between terminals such as Duke Point, Tawasin, Pat Bay, all very, very different and cannot and should not be compared to what you are trying to do here. So I'm sorry, I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I've listened to the neighbourhood on this issue, and I appreciate the fact that BC Ferries has modified their plans, their proposals to some degree, but it's still a major impact on the neighbourhood. I listened with interest to the young man who expressed the concerns about pollution to the environment and the wildlife, and to the people that use Newcastle Channel, and to Mr. Stone, who's going to be proposing another development in the future. And I simply can't. There's no way you can compare this with the Duke Point. That is commercial, highly industrial, and Brecon Newcastle is residential, and I can't support these signs this evening. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're just going to vote on this thing. Could he not wait?
Yes.
Anyway, because you know, I think we all feel the same. I'm surely there's nobody else that's going to have a different opinion on it. So,
Well, I was on the speakers list prior to the
okay.
last speaker.
Well, he'll be back, so you've
No,
got
no.
some time. Oh, go ahead. No, actually, you weren't. I took her off by mistake, so go ahead.
I just want to say that there is a distinct difference between this site and other sites, and it's a residential. This council couldn't approve a windsock at the Sea Air Terminal on Stewart Avenue. So how in the heck we're going to be able to approve 3 LED signs comes as an absolute shock to me. So I think everybody knows where I sit on this.
Okay, well, let's not wait. I think if the motion that you have made was seconded, do you want to read it for the benefit of those there?
As reading on the staff recommendation.
Yeah,
Your
I
Worship.
was thinking that he was going to change on that, but that's fine. So the question's been called. All those in favour? Opposed? The motion is defeated.
Recommendation, Councilors, development variance permit number DVP 239-770 Franklin Street, reduce the parking requirement for secondary street from 1 to 0.
Second.
Moved and seconded. No discussion. All those in favour?
Your Worship.
Opposed?
Your Worship, you have to call if somebody wishes to speak on the DVP as well.
Sorry? On which one?
You need to call if somebody wishes to speak on that DVP. Your
On
Worship.
239? Okay. Is there anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 770 Franklin Street, DVP 239? Councillor Kipp, hearing none.
Motion for Councilors, development variance permit number DVP 239-770 Frank Street, reduce the parking requirement for a secondary street from 1 to 0 spaces.
Please, could you keep the noise down? We're still running the council meeting.
Oh, sorry, I was being too loud? Oh, no. Just kidding.
Is there a seconder? Moved and second. No debate. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries.
Motion adjourned. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Yeah,
Motion to adjourn.
I think to adjourn because the agenda is far too long. to do.
Your Worship.
But I just want to ask if there's any really critical things that.
Yeah, there's a bylaw that must be considered for final adoption. Is item 11A. If you wanna deal with that, I would appreciate it.
11A, are you saying? Okay.
Yes, Your Worship.
Bylaws with no accompanying report. That's the road closure one. So if somebody would like to move 11A? Sorry?
I will move 11A.
Is there a second? Seconded. Discussion on 11A, Councillor Anderson, you're just,
Their delegation, I'm going to vote against.
I know, okay. So all those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor Brennan and Councillor Kipp opposed, balance council in favor, the motion passes. And now, Councillor Anderson?
I was just going to ask if I can move my two motions that are under the notices of motion, but I don't think they're overly controversial.
Are they critical to tonight's meeting?
I would prefer to have them started to be worked on instead of continuing to wait because I brought
Okay,
them
well,
for-
before that, Mr. Farrow, is there anything else that needs to be done tonight in the time?
My understanding is that's what all the stuff wants at the bylaw that you just passed.
Okay. So, what's council's view on?
I would appreciate if council would indulge me for 4 minutes so that we can do the two notices of motion.
Are they urgent?
Well, I've been waiting.
Discussion on that.
3 weeks.
So moved.
Councillor Anderson.
Okay, well then I would.
All in favor? Opposed?
Clock's on.
Clock's on. That's motion 1 and 2, of course. We don't have to do them seriatim. So that's done. Now, were you going to move the next motion? That was it.
What just happened?
So your worship, now it's 11 o'clock. If you want to continue the meeting, we need a
There's
motion
so much
to pass.
that we'll never be able to finish tonight. And so, what are you doing? What are you saying?
I'm saying what just happened because I asked if I could have 4 minutes to do the two motions and council approved.
They were done.
I didn't move any
Didn't
motion.
have to.
So
It was already done. It was moved and seconded, correct? And the vote was on?
Your worship, maybe I can clarify. My understanding, it was move and second motion number 1 and motion number 2 in 15B, and that was passed by council.
okay,
Is that
then
correct?
That's fine with me then.
I agree with you. That's what I'm.
Okay.
Okay, I agree. Is there a seconder on that? We stand adjourned.